right, that's much better. This is a hearing called to order. We are reconvening the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. And I recognize the presence of a quorum of members of the committee. Ms. Williams, will you please read the title of the resolution and the members of the committee who are present?
Resolution number 190090, a resolution authorizing the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform to hold public hearings to examine adequate solutions in addressing the specific needs of incarcerated women. Committee members who are present, starting from my left, are Claire Shubik-Richards of the Pennsylvania Prison Society. We have Wilfredo Rojas. We have Keir Gray, Chief Defender, Councilman Curtis Jones Jr., Julie Wertheimer from the Managing Director's Office, and Judge DeLeon.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. First and foremost, I'd like to recognize State Representative Morgan Cephas and her staff for bringing this issue to our attention. Also, Ms. Is Casey Jones over there? Yeah, she is, who wanted to take a deeper dive into women's issues pertaining to incarceration. I am thankful for the members of the committee. We don't wake up as experts on criminal justice reform. We, through our experiences in working with people like you, learn from you. And that is the purpose of today, to learn from you and to take that information and apply it. Taking that information and apply it not only to our policies and laws that we create both at the state level and at the city level, but also our budgetary priorities. One of the things that we get to do is, through this bully pulpit, talk about an issue. Second thing we get to do is evaluate that issue as it relates to the standards of our policies and how we apply and address that issue. And finally, we appropriate. We appropriate through departments like the prisons and others and courts so that we put our money where our mouth is. And we hope to continue that strive. And I'm very happy to acknowledge my co-convener here today. She needs no introduction, star of, you want me to stop? All right, I'll stop. But Keir Gray has made her mark in criminal justice reform and is a person, along with my other panelists, who walks it like she talks it. Ms. Gray.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilman Jones. I have not had a chance to say it publicly, but I definitely want to. I want to thank our first female prison commissioner, Commissioner Carney, a woman with her background and just her resolve for making sure that we see people for who they are and look at what's driving the behaviors has been transformative in our prison system, and we're lucky to have her. So I want to make sure that I gave a special shout out to her because we've worked with her since I've been the chief defender, and I've never had a prison commissioner so open and so willing to do things differently than what was done in the past. So thank you so much for your leadership, and I'm really glad that you're here.
And with that, are there any other members of the panel who would like to start off with an opening statement? You are more than welcome, Your Honor.
Let me just say that this is a very important issue, and I'm so glad that we were able to convene today to discuss this and what we can do as a committee to help everyone that's here accomplish the goals that you're trying to achieve. And thank you for being here.
And with that, Ms. Williams, will you please read the names of the first panelists to testify?
Before we begin with the first panel, we do have an opening poem from the People's Paper Co-op. Please feel free to come forward at this time.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You can sit or stand, but bring the mics to you. And please state your name for the record. We have, the stenographer needs that kind of information.
You got it.
There you go.
Good morning, council members and members of the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. My name is Faith Bartley. I am the lead fellow member of the People's Paper Co-op. I am here on behalf of both incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, those who can be here with us and those who cannot. Today, we're going to present you with a beautiful and powerful poem written by over 100 Philadelphia women who have been greatly impacted and affected by the criminal justice system. A poem that expresses what we need to thrive, not just survive. We're excited to share this with you all because we believe that we are the experts you all need to hear from the most. Thank you for your time and this opportunity. 1, 2, 3. We the women! We the women are powerful. We the women are wild. We the women are fierce. We the women are unstoppable, you dig?
We are masterpieces, the core of the family. Water us to help our seeds grow.
We are strong, wonderful, the connection to the root of life, the backbone of the world. We are what our communities need.
But though we are free, remember that we still need opportunities to excel in life, stability, healing, and equality.
Though we are free, there are too many women away from their children and families. Too many caregivers away from their neighborhoods and friends, their jobs and responsibilities.
Which means there are too many motherless children, that kids are having to raise themselves without guidance, without the love they need.
Which means we can't joyfully walk strongly through our communities, sharing our voices, life skills, and experience, that we're perishing from thirst.
It means that families are broken apart, that we're suffering from mental anguish, that our futures are being interrupted, that this system is creating the next generation of possible criminals. The nest is crumbling. We the women!
We the women are the queen bees. So when you lock us up, you lock up the hope of a whole community, the whole family.
You lock up survivors, providers, nurturers, grandmoms, mothers, sisters, daughters, and wives, the heart of our families, the strength we carry for family and friends, the entire hive and whole colony of bees.
You take away our chance to thrive, our ability to nurture our loved ones. Time to talk with our children about their dreams and their nightmares. Our power to show compassion and give support.
Because I was incarcerated, I wasn't there to give my mother the encouragement and support she needed while going through chemo.
To stand up for my family.
To help raise my offering.
To take my little cousin to school.
To pay respect to my grandma when she passed away.
To ask my children about their day and help them with their lives and homework.
To voice my opinion.
To help other women see their strength to make the community grow.
To be in the audience when my daughter got her master's degree and to let her know how proud I am of her.
To coach my special needs baseball team.
To give my sisters and my brothers the love they needed.
To care and guide my 2 daughters in difficulties they faced. They were alone without me as their protector and hero.
I stand up for women because it feels like we're all we had. If you heal women, you'll heal the nation, because we are the bricks to build our own foundations. And I know how it feels to be held down and need help up.
Because it's daddy's maybe, mommy's baby, because if I don't, who will? Because when we come together in unity, we can move mountains. We can prove our worth. We have the power to stay strong no matter what.
We can show that we have what it takes to succeed because we matter.
We scream, free our mothers, because we're misunderstood.
We birth the children into the world, and without us, who will guide them?
Who will help communities and families to flourish, to survive, to maintain the strength of the community?
We are the heart of the family unit, and without our queen, there would be no honey.
Because the struggle is real, but we can do this together.
Because we need love. We deserve equality just like you. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the People's Paper Co-op and formerly incarcerated women, we have some beautiful, amazing artwork to give you guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, will you please read the names of the first panel to testify?
State Representative Morgan Cephas, Latyra Blake, Naima Sanchez, and Samira Shabazz.
Welcome. Representative, state your name for the record. You've done this before.
Yes.
And begin your testimony, please.
I appreciate that. Good morning. I am State Representative Morgan Cephas, and I serve the 192nd Legislative District, which is in West Philadelphia, up in the PA Commonwealth General Assembly. So I first and foremost want to thank the People's Paper Co-op. I want to thank all of the formerly incarcerated women that are able to testify here today. We oftentimes, in the criminal justice reform conversation, are oftentimes looking at it from a male lens, and we oftentimes forget the impact that this has on our women, and not just our women, but their families, our mothers, our sisters, our cousins, and I feel like this conversation today is extremely timely, and I want to thank the committee for allowing us to have this discussion. Again, thank you for having us here today. My hope is that today's testimony and conversation will lead to intentional policies, legislation, and social action that support dignity for our incarcerated women in Philadelphia, but also across the Commonwealth. Thank you to the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform for having this important conversation. In my role as chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus Subcommittee on Women and Girls of Color, I am committed to ensuring that women and girls, especially women and girls of color, are not left out of the much-needed conversations, reform, policy, and cultural shifts that we are demanding in our overall criminal justice system. To put things into context, women are the fastest growing population segment of America's incarcerated population. Between 1970 and 2014, there was a nearly five-fold increase in the number of people, men and women, in U.S. jails, according to a report from the Vera Institute of Justice in the Safety Justice Challenge. During that same time frame, there was a 14-fold increase in the number of women in jails nationwide, growing from 8,000 women in jails in 1970 to nearly 110,000 in 2014. Like men in jail, these women are disproportionately people of color, overwhelmingly poor and low income, survivors of violence and trauma, and have high rates of physical and mental illness and substance use. And nearly 80% of them are mothers, primary caregivers, and single parents to young children. As we elevate the issue of criminal justice reform, we must remember women in the system, a system which has historically served a predominantly male population. In my role as both chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Women and Girls of Color and as a commissioner on the Philadelphia Women's Commission, I have had the opportunity to sit alongside my colleagues to delve deeper, finding mostly a lack of policies and resources that address the unique needs of female-bodied prisoners, the unique needs of primary caregivers. As a state legislator, I believe that it is essential for us to hold the system that serves these populations accountable for addressing distinctive needs, a benefit that impacts rehabilitation and development and which contributes to overall safer communities. Two of the first issues that I came across concerning dignity for incarcerated women were related to inhumane shackling of women in labor and lack of access to female hygiene products. These two issues brought to light smaller and larger needs of incarcerated women and in a visit to both SCI Muncie and SCI Cambridge, and we heard a series of cries coming from the women themselves. As daunting as the statistics are, it is the stories of women with lived experiences inside and outside of prison walls that might haunt you. Ones like that of Mary Baxter, who has repeatedly shared her experience of giving birth while shackled and was then placed in solitary confinement post-delivery because the facility in which she was housed had nowhere else to put her in, nowhere else to place someone in her condition. Across the country, states like New Jersey, Connecticut, and Kentucky are stepping up to the plate to ensure female prisoners have access to the resources they need while incarcerated and upon release. It is evident that legislators are taking responsibility to, one, give these populations the dignity they deserve as people, and two, to contribute to their growth and success upon reentry. Both points backed by evidence that shows the positive impact this access has on recidivism rates, lower crime rates, and least expectantly, the development and success of our next generation. The great thing is that oftentimes in Harrisburg, where we have a Republican majority, we aren't able to get a lot of these issues tackled and a lot of these policies implemented. But the great thing is that we have a very progressive Philadelphia, a city with progressive leaders like our prison commissioner. So when we have conversations about lack of feminine hygiene products and shackling, here in the city of Philadelphia, we are doing it right. And I want to especially acknowledge our prison commissioner for taking the strides and being a leading example of a system that many counties need to follow here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I do want to thank her for that. But I also want to recognize that there's so much more that we could be doing within our prison systems, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. Some of the budgetary things that we've introduced to, again, try to address the quality of life of our prisoners is possibly providing free monthly phone calls to incarcerated parents that are primary caregivers, or creating a former inmate mentoring program. Requiring health screening, reporting, so to ensure that our women are staying healthy while they're in prison. There is a statistic that on average, women are gaining 40 more pounds versus their male colleagues, and that they cost 40% more while they are incarcerated than the male population. An additional piece that we are considering is limiting cavity searches and inspections to medical professions. Possibly considering family placement when identifying the prison that they're going to ensure that they're able to stay in close proximity to their families. Additionally, we are looking to require that staff working with women, especially pregnant women, are trained and have educational requirements to understand the level of trauma that they are going through during their pregnancy as well as during the postpartum period. There's a series of bills that, again, we are proposing up in Harrisburg, but again, sometimes we are often stalled because of our political divisiveness. But again, I feel like Philadelphia is uniquely positioned to not only just have the criminal justice reform conversation, but to put policies and legislation in place that will, again, keep us at the forefront of this conversation as it relates to protecting our women. So I thank you again for all of the partners, again, all of our incarcerated women that are fighting the fight and trying to be a leading example to protect those that they leave behind after they leave those walls. So I thank you again for having this conversation, and I look forward to what we produce as a result of today's discussion.
Representative, we don't know your time needs, so we are, as a committee, what we usually do is we let the entire panel testify and then engage in questioning, but because you might have to do other things with the Commonwealth, we'd like to
Sure.
pose questions to you now. And also I want to recognize the third co-chair, Kevin Bethel, who has joined us.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Representative Cephas. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. First of all, is anyone kind of looking at the why? What's driving this influx of women going into the systems that we see now in such a mass, trend? I know for me, working at the Defender Association, we kind of saw this coming a while ago when men were being taken out of the households, the primary caretaker, and they were given long, lengthy, harsh sentences. There was no services or nothing paid attention to the families and the families' needs. So the desperation that we were going to understand that usually seeps in, I'm not sure, we haven't studied it, but there has to be a correlation between what we used to do in terms of men and harsh punitive sentences as it relates to even small drug offenses, and the fact that families were left destitute because of those things. Secondly, I know there's usually a failure to recognize some women as victim and offender when they become, when they get on my end of the criminal justice system. Recently, we had conversations with our district attorney, Mr. Krasner, about looking at women who have had an enormous amount of trauma and domestic violence who were charged themselves with domestic violence and creating a diversionary program for that when there was information that showed that they had been subject to abuse. Mr. Krasner was all for it. However, the funding that we tried to apply for through Harrisburg would not be available to people who are now being charged with a crime, even though they had that past label of victim. Is there anything that we're looking at in Harrisburg that makes this, that recognizes this dual victimization as well as, I guess if you want to call it, people that are perpetrating criminal activity, understanding that a person is a whole person, and sometimes the criminal activity is a symptom of the issues that have been going on for a while that have been unaddressed. And when they come into this system, can we treat them as both? And are there funding that could be available that would recognize that dual role?
So one of the things...
There were a number of questions, but that goes to everybody. Keep that in mind when you come up. Thank you.
So one of the things that we're trying to do on the state level is, again, to take a deeper dive into that very issue. One of the bills that we're offering is to require PCCD, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, to establish a subcommittee that focuses particularly on the women that are incarcerated, women that are in our pipelines, and to, again, address those issues that you are raising. Again, we're oftentimes looking at it from a male perspective, so we don't really know what the statistics are and as to why women are coming more into our prisons. But we do see that they're coming in with mental health issues. We do see that 80% of the women have experienced some type of sexual trauma. And again, back to one of our bills, we are wanting to require our correctional officers and anyone that's going to be interacting with women to understand and have some educational requirements and do some training around understanding that trauma. Because oftentimes when they're going into these facilities, they're oftentimes re-traumatized. And that has an impact on their behavior, impact on their ability to rehabilitate. So we do believe that through that vehicle, we'll be able to get to some of the questions that you're asking.
Okay. And as far as funding, because the state didn't recognize any woman who has had a history of traumatic abuse and domestic abuse, who had maybe finally said enough and have done something, in terms of the person that had been their abuser. When we tried to get diversionary programs and funding for programming and treatment to treat them as the victims that they were, we were told that if they were charged with a crime, they were not eligible for VOCA funding.
Okay, so that's definitely something I can look into and see what's happening there. Where's that gap in trying to, again, rehabilitate the woman? So that's something I can look into.
Thank you.
So, Representative, again, thank you for raising this issue to a priority level for all of us. The state is big brother or big sister, and we come under you, particularly when it comes to penal codes and things like that. One of the things that we might want to address is a codification evaluation of those codes to see how they disproportionately impact women. As a member of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, that would be of interest to us to take a look at the disparate impact of those codes. That's number one. Number two, you raised an interesting question by way of the design of prisons and what might be helpful, whether it's birthing rooms or whatever it is, that we can ask our correctional executives to take a look at. Maybe we'll hear that we're ahead of the curve on some of those things, but that is something that probably should be considered, the special needs of people of a female gender, and particularly when they are pregnant and about to give birth and those kinds of situations. So is there any movement on that?
Yes, I mean, our goal, and luckily we have our DLC secretary, Secretary Wetzel, who actually believes also, similar to our district attorney, that pregnant women should definitely be diverted out of the prison system. Finding some type of diversionary program in order to not put them into our facilities, because I mean, our facilities can't manage, don't have the right structure in order to keep them healthy. I mean, we just recently got sued in Lackawanna County because of some challenges that the mother went through during her birthing process. But luckily, a lot of our prison systems, at least on the state level, do provide facilities that are, if you will, comforting for the family, welcoming. Philadelphia, again, is leading in that space also, but we do have surrounding counties that don't actually take that approach. And a lot of our bills are looking to ensure that they move towards that direction. So again, Philadelphia is leading the charge. The goal and the hope is to divert, again, pregnant women out of our prison system and put them in programs that they actually need to rehabilitate. It was interesting during both of our tours to SEI Muncie and SEI Cambridge. A good majority of the women that are coming back into our prisons on the state level that are pregnant are there because of probation tech. And we asked each of the wardens, is there no other way that we can get them on the right path other than bringing them back into a system that doesn't have the right amount of counseling, doesn't have the right amount of medical health treatment in order to support the woman once she either gives birth or when she's coming back into the system while she's pregnant. So again, Philadelphia is leading the charge in keeping our women healthy and having space available for them to bring in their family members and actually be comfortable, but it's a lot of work that we need to be doing throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and other counties.
And finally, there is an effort afoot to provide teleconferencing for, in this case, fathers who want to be a part of their children's lives from time to time, being in touch, particularly with schools, and dealing with the report card issue or any behavioral issues that a child might have. And what was found was you'd be surprised still how much influence a primary caregiver, father and or mother, can have over a child that might be acting out because of the absence of their parent. And I don't know whether we've brought that to scale yet, that kind of program, but would love to work with you and Commissioner Wetzel to talk about how we can utilize that to keep the family more connected and intact. I think it's good on both ends.
Yeah.
I think it's good for the folk incarcerated, but I think it's good for the family to know that mom may be gone, but she's not forgotten, and 9 times out of 10 going to be back in your life. And that kind of connectivity, even if it's electronic, probably could go a long way.
Yeah, I think it's a great system, and it's a great way to keep families connected. I believe we have a partnership here in Philadelphia with the prison system and our Philadelphia Free Library, where they do the teleconferencing. But I think one of the things you have to remember is that a lot of our inmates are low income. and oftentimes they are weighing whether or not they get food from commissary, or in some counties get their feminine products, or save the dollars for that phone call, or save the money for that teleconferencing opportunity. I do believe that the teleconferencing piece, I want to say, is about $20, and some of our inmates are making, maybe $1.15 per hour or less than that. So I think we have to, keep that in mind when we're talking about maintaining a connection between families. In some other states, I want to say New Jersey just passed legislation to allow phone calls, and I want to say teleconferencing for free. But which I know that comes at a cost, but I do think it's something that I would love to see Philadelphia potentially pilot and invest the resources through a budgetary line item to offer that. I mean, not totally free,
I
but
understand.
possibly put some restrictions on it. But
Got to put our money where our mouth is, right?
yes, but remembering that our inmates are low income and they're having to make those tough choices without having, a real salary, if you will.
Representative,
Mr. Rojas.
I have 3 questions.
Sure.
I've noticed there's no mention in the testimony about using the authority of a male personnel against women. Have you come across any of those incidents at the state level?
Say this again?
So
Using sexual assault by men against women who are incarcerated.
Using sexual assault?
Sexual
Yeah,
assault.
sexual assault against women who are incarcerated.
What's the question? What about it? There's no,
Have you had any incidents? Because I noticed there's nothing here.
Do male
Do male-
staffers attack
right.
female inmates?
so we've heard reports, yes. We've heard reports, but I can't speak to that directly. And we don't have any legislation that is trying to address that issue.
Now, in your training, do you only talk about females in the context of them being incarcerated, or do you go beyond that and talk about the history of women in this country and what that means to society in general?
So we would leave that up to the DOC to determine what the training looks like. But the main goal of what we're outlining is trying to get officers and anyone interacting with women to understand the trauma that they've experienced and while they're incarcerated, and working towards not re-traumatizing them while they're incarcerated. That is the main goal of it. But if that's a recommendation that you would like to make
Sure.
to the DOC when they design the actual training, then that's something that can be incorporated.
And the last question is reintegration into the community and back into the family. Is there a program that we can look to get funded where you begin the reintegration process behind the walls with the family members? So when you reintegrate back into society, you were able to resolve a lot of the familial issues that you had before you went in.
So Philadelphia actually has some programs that actually do that. And so, for example, who's here today is Ardella's house. Yes, right here. Some programs actually do that, try to work with the inmate to maintain the interaction between the family and the community, but then also help them to navigate post once they are released. There's also a program called, I want to say it's called A New Leash on Life, which is it's almost like a workforce development transition program where they use dogs to help kind of rehabilitate, what are they called? Dogs that have been through their own type of trauma. They help the inmates rehabilitate them, and it's a program that they're able to connect to once they leave the prison, and they connect them with job opportunities. They provide them with stipends. And some of the main challenges I believe women face once they're leaving the prison system is, being access housing, being able to access resources for transportation purposes. And that's something that, again, organizations like Ardela's House and A New Leash on Life really make an intentional effort to invest in. So each of those groups have actually gone after city resources that they've been awarded and also some state resources through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So there is funding available to support those programs and bring them to scale. Now, is it enough? It's never enough given all of the needs that we have here in the city of Philadelphia.
Now, does that also extend to children that are in the custody of the Department of Human Services because their parents are incarcerated?
Senator Hughes.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
yes. Thank you, Councilman. So in the last budget cycle, it might have been this budget cycle, where if a contractor gets a contract from the Department of Corrections, a percentage of that contract goes into a funding pot administered by PCCD, Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, specifically for young people that have parents that were incarcerated or have been victims of a crime. So there are pots of dollars to support organizations that provide that soft hand holding. Thanks, Councilman.
Thank you, Representative. This is Claire from the Pennsylvania Prison Society, and I just want to speak to the issue of family connection that was raised. As you may all know, the Prison Society is Pennsylvania's independent prison monitor. We are the de facto ombudsman for incarcerated people in Pennsylvania, and we also provide support for incarcerated people and their families. For close to 2 decades, we have provided, with the help of the Department of Correction, subsidized bus service for Philadelphia families to visit loved ones in prisons throughout the state. We charter 10 buses a month. They usually sell out. Unfortunately, the buses to Muncie and Cambridge are some of the least populated buses that we have.
Yeah.
Common sense and research backs it up, tells us that family connection, maintaining family connection during a period of incarceration makes a tremendous difference for someone to be able to come home successfully. Our buses help provide that connection. In addition, this past year, we received a grant from Uber to provide free rides for Philadelphia families with small children and elderly members to visit up at State Road. We're still waiting for a renewal of that grant, so that grant is currently browned out, but we had it for a year and provided several thousand rides free of cost for Philadelphia families. But with regard to video conferencing, the state in the last 6 or 7 years has actually increased the hurdles for a family being able to talk from a state facility via video conference. And anyone who would like to discuss that further, I'm happy to. But unfortunately, that key tool for keeping families connected, Vera recently did a research study about the effectiveness of video conferencing of keeping families connected. As any of us who have remote families, it's not the same as an in-person visit. It's not as effective as an in-person visit, but it's certainly better than nothing. And unfortunately, in the last several years, the ability of families families with incarcerated loved ones at state facilities to utilize that service has been made more difficult.
Thank you. Your Honor, did you?
Mine is more like a statement. Representative, to me, it sounds like you're taking this issue by the horns and are wrestling with it and coming up with effective ways to overcome these particular type of problems. And I thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, you've seen this conversation happening nationally. Believe it or not, the media constantly paints the picture that we Republicans and Democrats don't tend to get along up in Harrisburg and DC. But this is one of the topics where we are willing to roll up our sleeves and move the needle on the issue. And It's an exciting time, especially, again, for women, because we're constantly having this criminal justice reform conversation from the male lens. And there are states that are moving legislation similar to some of the things that I've mentioned across the finish line to, again, not to create a cozy place, but to recognize that they are still human and their quality of life should be protected when they're in our custody. And that's something that we have to remember, that they are in our custody. And I think Philadelphia, again, as much as we've been leading the way across the Commonwealth, there's a lot more things that can be done. And hopefully this conversation today will help move the needle in either policy shifts or legislation. So I thank you again for having this conversation today. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Representative.
I'm here.
I have one last
Sure.
question or one last area of concern. And I know what you said is realistic, where most of the women in state custody, they're on probation violations. I know your colleagues are working on probation reform, and I have not seen that in Philadelphia, but I know being in other counties and being around other policymakers from other counties, there are a lot of probation officers whose policies are that if a woman is pregnant and they have been known to use substances, they will order them to be locked up while they are pregnant until they deliver their baby so that they will not use those substances. I think there's more of a creative way that we can deal with that. And I don't know, in your efforts to push probation reform, that we deal with that policy and practice as well, because I think that that's just a real ineffective use of our prisons, and it's real detrimental to the women.
Yeah. Now, I'm not familiar specifically if there's anything incorporated that addressed this issue in the current draft bill.
There's not. Maybe now there could be.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when we have, again, Secretary Wetzel interested in diverting women out of the prison system that are pregnant. Because again, when we have a county that was just recently sued because of them being in our custody, us not treating them properly, that's something that the Commonwealth can't afford. So again, it's something that he's really interested in seeing. One of my colleagues, Representative Summer Lee, again, this is a package of about 15 bills. My colleague Summer Lee from out of Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was actually recently sued from the ACLU because of the restricting housing issue. By putting pregnant women into solitary confinement, they were sued and required to come up with a policy. So as a result of all that, she's come up with legislation to require judges to divert pregnant women out of the prison system, even if they have reoffended, and to connect them with the services that they really need on the outside. Because again, our system was not built to, manage, these type of issues.
Thank you.
They have a model at Rutgers Island Prison for pregnant women that you might want to look into.
Okay.
Representative, I just want to build on what the Chief Defender was asking about earlier in your comments about pushing PCCD to have a subcommittee focused on women. Is it possible to also have the state look, I would say beyond, but really before, not only diversion from prison and court-based diversion options, but really put an emphasis on pre-booking diversion where possible? As we know, at least locally, a lot of the women suffer from substance use, behavioral health trauma, and those should be treated as medical issues, not
Criminal
crimes.
issues, yes,
So.
yes. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why the subcommittee did exist during the Obama administration, and because PCCD primarily gets its funding from the federal government, when policy shifts, naturally, subcommittee shifts. But I mean, just to your point, when you see an uptick in this population, there's something that we're missing and that we need to better understand. So that is something that we're going to really try to push so we can take a deeper dive into a lot of these issues across the entire continuum of when they even go into the school to prison pipeline to when they are offending or reoffending or are on probation. We need a body that is studying specifically this issue so we can put the right policies, resources in place to be able to address, this concern.
Thank you.
Similarly, when we found a disparate impact on African American men locally, from everything from healthcare to gun violence, we created a commission to study the why. And I think equally important is that emphasis on understanding, as you said, Co-Chair, the why.
So I do hope as your role on PCCD, you can really champion that effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, panelists. If you have time to stick around, please do, but thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Samira Shabazz. I'm a policy director with Ardella's House. Ardella's House is a reentry program here in Philadelphia who serve women who have been formerly incarcerated and who are incarcerated with a variety of services: housing, family reunification, mentoring, and just basic life skills. My goal here today is to convey a message that formerly incarcerated women can become productive, law-abiding members of society with the right programming, and to show how many barriers women face post-incarceration, regardless of the date of offense and conviction. Sorry.
Take your time.
I was 16 years old when I was convicted in 1993, right here in this building, in Judge Lisa Rachette's courtroom. It's been 27 years. However, my felony will last forever. I have a Bachelor's of Science with a concentration of Human Services, a Master in Science with a concentration of Human Services, and an MBA. However, I'm still forbidden from taking my son on school trips. I've taught in South Africa. I studied international business management in Dublin, Ireland. I've worked 14 years for Public Health Management Corporation right here in Philadelphia. In 27 years, I've not had no other contact with law enforcement, not even a speeding ticket. However, as a mother, sometimes it becomes very, very difficult explaining to your child an incident that happened way before he was even thought about prevents me from going on college tours with his school. Because what do you have to do? You have to submit to what? A background check. His teachers and guidance counselors don't know me as a formerly incarcerated woman. They don't know me as a convicted felon. They know me as Jamal's mom that comes to all of the parent-teacher conference, Jamal's mom that volunteers for all of his sports games. And something that happened in 1992 prevents me from going on college tours. I thought I wasn't going to get emotional today. I gave myself this long pep talk all the way down here to keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. And it was just like a flood of emotions just came over me. We do become productive members of society. We do. I'm a homeowner. I've been in my home for 17 years. I'm a committee person in the 60th Ward, 5th Division. We do become productive members of society. However, it's so many barriers that prevents us from continually to be productive members. Housing restrictions. If I needed to apply for public housing assistance, I wouldn't be able to because of a felony conviction from 1992. Not 2002, not 2012, not 2019, 1992. I was 16. I am 43 years old now. No other contact with law enforcement. None. I did everything right. And these are some of the barriers, and I've just been fortunate that I've had a strong mentoring system and I had a group of people around me that supported me, and it was like they kind of conspired together for me to be successful. Everyone isn't afforded that opportunity. You know, I had a judge who believed that I could be successful, who followed me all the way through. I was 17 when I got to Muncie State Prison. You know, now they have, you know, these units now for young adult offenders. It wasn't that in 1993 when I got there. I went straight in the general population. And Judge Rachette, she's followed it all the way through. I remember when I got my first job, she wrote a recommendation letter for me to get a job. I had a strong system of people who believed that I had the ability to turn my life around and to do something different. And I just would hope that legislators see the same thing with the many women who come through the Public Defenders Association. Many of the women defendants are poor in Philadelphia. 80% of the women, whether they were formerly incarcerated or incarcerated, are mothers. And my goal here today is to humanize. You know, we're saying inmates and incarcerated, but these are women, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters, their grandmothers, their primary caregivers. And that is my goal here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You share the microphone, please. Thank you again for your patience. State your name for the record.
Go ahead. Hi, my name is Latara Blake. Good morning, city member. Good morning, council members and special committee on criminal justice reform members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Latara Blake, and I'm a mother of 4 sons, a peer mentor, a friend, a child of God, a teacher, an advocate, a strong, determined woman. That is what defines me, not my criminal record. I spent almost a year at RCF because I couldn't afford to pay bail. My youngest child was 7 months when I was incarcerated. That meant a year away from him and my other children, my church, and my relationship with my family. It meant not getting the help I needed to stay out of jail, not finishing school, and not being there for the people who depended on me. Being locked up before even going to trial made me feel like I was guilty, without a way out, like I didn't belong and my life was over, like everyone who believed in me, including myself, was going to give up on me. Since coming home, I've done so much. I've completed outpatient treatment and successfully stayed clean for 26 months and counting. I've been hired as a peer mentor at the People's Paper Co-op, and I teach other women to use art to demand what they want to change in their city and community. For the last 2 years, we worked with the Philadelphia Community Bail Fund to free women for Mother's Day, and being a part of that felt wonderful, to be on the other side of the walls and to welcome women like myself home. Who couldn't afford to pay bail, with open arms and smiles and tears. I walked off 7 years of probation and successfully challenged PHA, who previously wouldn't provide me with the opportunity of housing because of my criminal record. And after meeting with them, they overturned my appeal and said my criminal past will not be a barrier to admission. I now have safe housing for me and my son, and I'm just getting started. But even with all that, even though I'm doing so much positive work, every time I go see my PO, I'm re-traumatized. I pack extra clothes, I write down phone numbers, I bring extra money, because I'm terrified that being locked up again, locked away from my kids and from all those who need me. 7 years is too long to feel this scared, and we need to end long-term probation sentences and help people get on with their lives. We've done our time, end fees and fines. Today I stand here so that the city council members and special committee members understand that we need to end cash bail. So many women like me are separated from their children, and it's tearing our communities apart. We spend so much money locking up women. If we ended cash bail and let those women out, the city could put more money into reentry programs so that women can have what they need to stay free and help our families and communities survive. I stand here to tell you that no one deserves to serve extremely long periods of probation. No one deserves to live in fears for 7 years. That one small mistake can send them back to jail and away from their kids again. Philadelphia is the most incarcerated large city in the country, and it's time to change. I stand here to tell you that women who have been locked up know what we need. We know that what our families need and what our communities need. We're ready to work with you to make changes we need. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak today, and I hope we'll have a chance to work together to make change for the women in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good morning, members of City Council and Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. I want to start by saying—
State your name.
My name is Naima Sanchez. I'm a Philadelphian. I'm also a staff member at the ACLU of Pennsylvania. I wanted to start off with this quote that I have, that with our experience come trauma and tears. And this is the reason why we need criminal justice reform, because there is trauma that's re-triggering us, and there are tears that we keep wiping away. So I just want to lead with that. So thank you for the opportunity to provide. I have a written testimony, and I appreciate the initiatives to criminal justice reform by this committee. I want to highlight some issues facing incarcerated women that are not addressed as often, particularly with my experience as being a transgender woman in the criminal justice system, including our experiences of police contact, court proceedings, sentencing, probation and parole, and the criminalization of transgender Philadelphians. It's important for me to highlight my personal experience with the criminal justice system and how the criminalization of survival modes taken by trans people, especially Black trans women and trans women of color, continue to hinder me in many areas of my life. As a transgender teenager growing up in Philadelphia during the early 2000s, it was hard. Stigma, barriers, and discrimination led me to drop out of high school and become homeless as a teen on the Philadelphia streets. This opened the doors for me to the sex work industry. This wasn't something I dreamed of doing with my body or my life. I had plans on becoming a doctor to help, people like myself, and also a lawyer to help, people like my father who have fallen through the cracks of the criminal justice system and kept re-entering into the system of oppression. I was locked up 8 times from the ages of 17 to 22. I was already dealing with how to provide necessities like housing, food, and clothing for myself, and barely meeting those needs. Now I was dealing with being detained and given probation with court fees and supervision fees on top of that. I was already oppressed and struggling to survive, but the criminal justice system had no mercy and furthered the oppression by mandating me to probation department, yet another part of the system that fails to provide a pathway to reentry and promote growth of citizens, productive citizens. After violating probation with a new arrest for sex work, I was given a detainer and held for trial in a men's facility as a woman, the House of Correction. I was administrated to protective custody and locked up for 22 hours a day. And because of my gender identity, I was repeatedly raped by a correctional officer who was supposed to be employed to protect me from other inmates. And I wasn't even able to access the medical needs that I had as a transgender person. 15 years later, I'm still dealing with the trauma of my sexual assault through therapy and prescription antidepressants. I'm a contributor to the city of Philadelphia in many ways, and I'm a fierce educator and advocate for all of our intersecting communities, issues, and causes. But still, I have a criminal record that prevents me from accomplishing the goals I have set out for myself. One of those goals is adopting a child. That's a need. The criminal justice reform is desperately needed, and we must take a look at all aspects of the system, from police profiling to sentencing reform, to make this change. We must also commit to eliminating the racial and gender disparities Philadelphia is faced within the entire criminal justice system. I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story, and if you have questions, I'm welcome to that as well. Thank you.
So, first of all, thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
And thank you for giving us that information, because you may assume that everybody on this side of the table has the answers. That is not the case. We, through your experiences, can develop answers, and that's why this is important. Are there any questions for Your Honor?
what you ladies have gone through is what I fight for and what I write about. There has to be a way that when you're doing the right thing for such a long period of time, that what you did in the past is forgiven totally, and that you either will have your record pardoned or expunged. What I gave the former Lieutenant Governor Stack, I gave him a program called Pathways to Pardons. And he started to operate that program through representatives and the state senators, where if you go to your state senator's office and put in a pardon application, it would go to the Board of Pardons from that state senator's office, and it was fast-tracked. So is that still going on now?
The fast track isn't happening.
Right.
But there is still a process in place, and our current Lieutenant Governor has made a big effort on streamlining the system to shrink the amount of time that probations do take. Now, it still does take some time, and there's still some reforms that need to be done, but our Lieutenant Governor is moving in the right direction. But there still is a time frame, and we don't necessarily have too much say on who jumps ahead of the line and who doesn't.
Yeah, we were better at it under Lieutenant Governor Stack. I'm going to have to get with Lieutenant Governor Fetterman and kind of like get him on board on this program as well. But you ladies should put in those applications. You have to get into the pipeline in order to have an opportunity to have a favorable result. If you don't put in that application, you'll just be telling the story over and over again, and it's a possibility if you put it in. If many people put it in, we have a better opportunity of getting people's records pardoned, because there'll be more people in front of that Board of Pardons and Parole. So please put those applications in, and let's see if we can make you totally whole. And if you have, put it in again.
Okay. Your Honor, have you seen the application?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
And I've also seen them filled out.
And it's 20 pages long, and you see how intense it is?
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's what we have.
No, and I'm not saying that it is what we have. However, everything gets examined except your medical records. And for some people, that can be very, very intimidating. They want to interview your neighbors, your employers, your former employers. So now you have to, and I can speak for myself. The conversation that we're having in 2019 is not the conversation we were having 10 years ago about criminal justice reform.
Right.
So for me, it was get a good job, be quiet, don't talk about ever being incarcerated, and kind of go under the radar so it never comes up, because you don't want to have that conversation in terms of your employer or the way people see you or the way people view you, because it's like, you were in jail before? Well, what happened? People, it's all of these assumptions. So when you see this application, and I probably downloaded it and printed it out 20 or 30 times, and it's always on my vision board, print out the application, do the application. And then when you start looking at the questions and all of the things that they want you to answer, it gets overwhelming and it becomes intimidating. And I'm not saying that they don't need that information, but when you're filling it out, it's like, whoa. It's not really I think his name is Wayne Jacobs, the Pardon Me Clinic. And they'll help you through the process, but it becomes something, for me, it's like, okay, it's been almost 30 years. It's like I've been able to be successful in my career, and kind of, I'm almost past the phase of my son being in school, so it's like, it's there. Do I want to do it? Absolutely. It's just intimidating. It's very intimidating.
When we first did it, we were helping people fill out the application.
Right.
And that was part of the whole process, that we actually had people that were sitting down helping people fill out the application. The first person that we used this for was State Senator Sharif Street. That's where he was the initial state senator that we did the program through.
Okay.
It started to expand from then. Of course, Lieutenant Governor Stack did not have a favorable result,
Okay.
and we had we have a change in leadership. But you are totally correct that when the program is done, you have to have help in filling out that application, and you should have that. And I guess that's something that the representative will address as time goes on.
I think the good thing is that we do have, under the new leadership, the new executive director, Brandon Flood, was actually someone that was incarcerated, went through the pardon process, and understands the challenges that the young lady's bringing up today. So with him and our new lieutenant governor, we've been able to remove some of the fees. There's been an additional state investment in expanding the staff, so the processing period goes a lot quicker. And I do believe they streamlined the process in some way. I can't really, okay. I want to make sure I'm correct with that. Yeah. So I think the good thing is that we're moving the needle a little bit, but he's only been in for a year and some change now. So hopefully with conversations like this, we'll be able to do a lot more based on the experience of people that are actually going through the process. So we have seen some progress.
So the only thing you can count on in this life is that there will be change. And that opinions, I've been here long enough now that I know the opinions shift back and forth. And it's incumbent upon everybody in this room to strike while the iron is hot to make change. And the forces out there, all the way up from the White House on down, create that gravity and change. So while we have the kind of leadership that we have now that is open to this kind of change, we have to be about our business to do that. Two things. Number one, and thanks to the prison commissioner and the people up here, House of Corrections is closed forever. And that was a Herculean task to do that, but it is incremental progress. It can never take back your experience, but it can prevent experiences of people going forward to ever have to go through that there. One question I had for you was, you said your bail kept you incarcerated with the inability to pay it for another year?
Yeah, I couldn't afford bail, so I sat in jail waiting to go to court for a year.
So if you don't mind sharing, how much was that bail?
I think it was like $1,100.
So for
But my mom had my children, so I didn't ask her to pay my bill.
So for $1,100, you spent a year in jail. In that time, did your life change outside, whether it was jobs or where you lived, employment? What happened?
Well, yeah, I lost my house.
You lost your house.
I lost everything in it, including my brother Ash's. Everything was placed in storage. The storage bill was more than the bill, and I lost everything. So when I came home, I went into treatment when I came home because I had no house.
Yeah, right.
And my mother, she had all 4 of my sons, and I had to just stay into treatment until I can keep, stay focused, get, I went to Mercy Hospice, then Interim House, and then Gardenzia, and then I wound up applying for PHA. I was denied because of my criminal record, even though when I lost my house, it was PHA, but I didn't lose it because of going to jail. I lost it because of, I lost it because of going to jail, but I wasn't evicted, because, I did some crime. I was evicted because of the gas not being on, but I was in jail, so I couldn't fight for it. So when I applied for PHA again, I was denied this time because of my criminal record. I appealed it. The defenders, one of the CLS lawyers, they went with me with Courtney Bowles, and we appealed it with all the letters from probation officer, the wonderful things that I'm doing, and they overturned it and said my criminal record would not be a barrier for housing, so that's how I was able to get housing again.
So just on the record that Washington DC has not had cash bail for 12 years. And either you are a danger to yourself and society or you are not. Cash does not make us
That's right.
any degree safer. It can make your particular circumstances on the presumption of innocence far worse, but it cannot make us necessarily safer. And so, I apologize for what you went through.
Thank you.
Councilman,
Thank you so much.
you raised something that's really wonderful, and I just want to tease out another thing in your exchange. So it's not only cash bail that was at fault here, but it's also that we had a court process that took a year, that you were sitting pretrial for a year. And if you look at court process times in other cities, they are much shorter. Now, there are reasons. It's a very complicated machine. But for somebody who is out pretrial, even not on cash bail for a year, they mess up, much like probation and parole, they're at the risk of coming inside. Having a court process that is that long causes a lot of the problems that we're seeing here too. But I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Representative, and thank you all. What you are doing by being here and talking to us is not easy. It is not easy.
So we have.
And you're a stand and you do it, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were intrigued by your testimony, obviously, but we have 3 other panels behind you. So to be fair to everyone's time, we are going to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you so
y'all
much
so
for your
much.
testimony.
Ms. Williams, will you please read the names of the second panel?
Commissioner Blanche Carney, Jovita Hill, and Judge Carolyn Timon.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's not your first time at that table. Every year, at least once a year, you get to spend time with us. So welcome back. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Blanche Carney. I'm Commissioner of the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Good morning, Chairperson Councilman Curtis Jones and the members of the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. Joining me today with my colleagues and peers here at the table, I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Philadelphia Department of Prisons criminal justice reforms at Riverside Correctional Facility pursuant to resolution number 190090, which authorizes hearings to examine adequate solutions in addressing the specific needs of incarcerated women. Our mission of the Philadelphia Department of Prisons is to provide a safe and secure correctional environment that prepares incarcerated persons for a positive reentry. Women are the fastest growing prison population, increasing 700% from 1980 to 2014. But here in Philadelphia, we've been working collaboratively with the criminal justice stakeholders for the MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge to decrease our population across the board, including women. As of October 21st, 2019, there are 365 women in our care, and only 7.91% of our prison population. And this number has steadily decreased with the help of our criminal justice partners since 2015. As the population continues to decrease, we continue to increase positive programming for pregnant and parenting women, connecting them with supportive treatment as well as for all women that are incarcerated at the Riverside Correctional Facility. Just to name a few, or I would be here all day. In response to this growing number of pregnant women and mothers incarcerated at the PDP, we've partnered with the Mom Mobile operations in 2006, a program offered by the Maternity Care Coalition. The PDP and Mom Mobile provides services to pregnant women and mothers of infants at RCF, partnering with women during their incarceration to prepare them for motherhood throughout parenting education and continue to assist after release. In 2018, the PDP and Mom Mobile accomplished the following: provided doula services Those are birthing coaching services to 10 women who gave birth while at RCF, and 4 more in 2019. 6 women participate in our lactation program, delivering 1,700 ounces of breast milk to the infants. Provided 16 prenatal classes for 20 students, and provided 58 parenting classes and 63 students enrolled, and 21 students graduating from the Department of Human Services Parenting Action Network parenting program. Our implementation of medication-assisted treatment has expanded the options for opioid-addicted individuals not maintained on methadone. An option 90% of eligible women and 80% of the eligible men choose to participate in this year. This program began at RCF in January of 2018, and there are currently 120 people enrolled in our MAT program. Female inmates represent 25% of the inmates enrolled in our MAT. Our MAT program is one of the largest MAT programs in the city. We also, several years ago, partnered with the Girl Scouts Beyond Bars. This is a program for mothers at RCF and their daughters to meet and share time and activities from October through June to learn life skills and complete regular Girl Scout activities, helping them foster the maternal-child bond. Stories Alive, in conjunction with the Free Library of Philadelphia, offers parents a chance to read with their children using video conferencing setups in neighborhood libraries similar to Skype or FaceTime. Artistic programming is available for the women at RCF, including our participation in the Hidden Lives Illuminated Animation Program at Eastern State, Pennsylvania earlier this year, and past Shining Light Ministry performances. Our new Leash on Life dog training program has begun working with our female inmates. Participation in this program reduced recidivism rates by nearly 50%, and many participants have job placements with groups like Act Philly upon release. Earlier this year, alumni for the PDP New Leash on Life program came to our graduation to speak on their experiences with the New Leash on Life program and how it has helped them with the successful release and navigation upon returning to their communities. Daytime and evening gymnasium hours exist for exercise opportunity, as well as transformational yoga and cardio, because we do know that women do gain weight at an alarming rate as compared to their counterparts that are not incarcerated. This year, we introduced 3 new policies for female offenders. Feminine hygiene products are provided to all regardless of ability to pay at no cost. Women who have given birth while in custody are permitted a 2-hour visit per week with the child and permitted to breastfeed in a designated area with the newborn. The PDP has also adopted an emotional support dog, Macaroon, from the New Leash on Life program. And Macaroon tours our facilities and also provides an extremely calming effect with the women at the Riverside Correctional Facility. We understand that women just don't grow up and say, I want to go to jail. There are traumatic histories, and unfortunately, I'm the last stop in that intervention. We can do more to assess before people become involved with the criminal justice system. We know women are suffering with traumatic backgrounds of abuse, sexual abuse, mental illness, and substance abuse. All of that at some point comes to a head, and they're engaging with criminal justice partners. And we have to do a better job to assess before people even get involved and start to go down that path of engaging the various criminal justice partners. We're clear that people aren't just waking up and wanting to commit crimes. There are things that are going on in the lives of citizens here in Philadelphia. I have the unique experience of being a social worker at the Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center when we had women there. When we started to experience the increase in the female population, that was the impetus for the Riverside Correctional Facility being built, which is unfortunate. We're in a great position right now where we are trending down in our numbers. Yes, there's a lot of work ahead of us and more that we can do. But for over 20 years, the Philadelphia Department of Prisons has been committed to women and their children. With the help of a Stoneleaf Foundation Fellow, we work collaboratively with the Department of Human Services to create a Know Your Rights bill for parents, incarcerated parents. And out of that came the scheduling of case conferences for incarcerated parents, men and women, to participate in family hearings so that their voices were heard. That was a collaborative effort, and it's still going on today. We've also, over 25 years, hosted a holiday party. It may not sound a lot, but in the month of December, we turn RCF into a room where the children take over. We have outside partners that come in, and the women spend time with their children. And whatever gift that that child receives is always stated from your mother. We maintain 10 minutes free phone call time every day that the mothers can call home and have those conversations. 10 free minutes, we maintain that over the years. I refuse to budge on that because I know how critical it is. We've also maintained in-person visits. Now, some jurisdictions have gone to televisits. In-person visits are very important because we know that is an opportunity for the mother to touch her child and the child to touch the mother. And it's important and it's incumbent upon us that we continue to work collaboratively to explore ways for us to address the needs of incarcerated women. And working with the Chief Defender here, Bradford Gray, we've done great work. We've explored opportunities where we can make changes, and they've been positive. And it's keeping the goal is what are we doing to best serve women who are incarcerated and find themselves there. And in closing, we have to do more pre-assessment before people are working their way through the criminal justice system. Thank you.
So members of the panel aren't supposed to clap, but I feel that you guys are compelled to do so when you hear good work being done. Just as a protocol, we're supposed to act stoic, but good job, good job. Good. Take all that clapping back. I just want to thank you. And how do we compare to other cities on the topic of addressing women who are incarcerated? It's okay to brag right now.
Well, I would say, 8 plus. 8 plus. The reason being is with the opioid epidemic and understanding the impact on women and children, when we implemented our MAT program, I said, no, we're going to start with the women. Why? Because they are the missing link. And so I knew I had children outside that were being cared for or in placement. And if we didn't offer the treatment first to the mother, that's going to be an even greater impact. So that was a bold move to implement MAT, start it with the women, and then give them an opportunity to recover. Use the time wisely to recover. In addition, we knew once we induced on MAT, now what? We were going the extra step, enrolling, starting with the women again, in medical assistance. All of the programs and treatments and health care that we start, we know that it has to be a continuum of care. We started MA enrollment with the women, and we expanded to the men. So the focus here is always, for me, I have a bias here. And that bias is understanding that the majority of our incarcerated mothers are parents, and that has a ripple effect on the children. So we need to make sure we're doing all that we can to help them transition. So not only did we start MAT, we started the MA enrollment, and we have a long-standing history with the Lutheran Settlement House for domestic education awareness. Many of our women are coming in with domestic violence backgrounds. And the charges now are related to some of those situations. And so we were at the forefront of understanding that women, being the major caretaker of the families, were being impacted, and now we have the second and third generations. So all of the programming, once we step back, we're looking to see who is going to benefit most. The male population benefits from all of the programs that we start with the women because we know they're the missing piece. We also understand with the recent amendment for Act 88, giving grandparents the opportunity to have an emergency 90-day guardianship where they can provide for the children. They can take them to appointments was instrumental. And so we continue to work collaboratively with the Department of Human Services or the guardians to make sure that the children their lives are impacted as minimal as possible. But incarceration is not easy. It takes a toll on the entire family, namely those children.
Can I just say briefly, I'm sorry. I want to say this to Commissioner Carney. Leadership matters, and effective leadership matters, and I want to thank you for your leadership. You have a sense of responsibility, and your unique perspective has allowed us to explore some of these issues. And when everyone says that you can't do things, yes, you can. You can do it if you have the will, desire, and the knowledge and information to do so, and you have done that. I know there's things that have gone on where you've been criticized for this or that. You're never going to be perfect, but I say keep doing what you're doing, because I see it, and we see it with our clients, how much they are understanding that the humanity is seeping back into this system. Mm-hmm. And while people don't want to understand or admit how much that is, how important that is, because it's not quantifiable, just look around. Look at the stories that you heard. These are people. These are human beings. And like you said before, when we were at a Criminal Justice Advisory Board, we had to realize, what are we doing? What do we want? And if we want short-term goals of punitive response, look at the long-term effects that has. And so I just thank you for your leadership. I can be on my soapbox all day, and I won't, because I know we have to get through a lot of people. But when you have leaders who care, this is the type of outcomes you get.
Commissioner, I just want to congratulate you again. We were social workers and social work supervisors together, and we've come a long way. You became commissioner, I retired. One of the issues that I was always concerned about is the contractors at the Philadelphia prison system and whether or not they reflect the population that's incarcerated in our prisons, and whether or not nonprofits as well as private companies are actually offering employment opportunities to the women and the men that are incarcerated behind bars.
Since my tenure, I've put that in place that we have to have post-release engagement. Post-release engagement is that if we're funding and partnering with you, there has to be a benefit post-release. A lot of programs will tout how well their programs are doing. Well, we're doing the heavy lifting, providing food, clothing, and shelter. But my concern is what happens to individuals when they release out. How are you transitioning them into post-release employment? So we've started that with the New Leash on Life, as I stated before, is one of our programs that has provided robust job placement upon release. In addition to housing, one of the alumni returned back and spoke about how it changed her life. And had she not been incarcerated, unfortunately, at RCF, she would never have had that opportunity. So we're expanding that for those programs that can provide workforce readiness and placement. It can no longer be a stipend. We need to transition people from a stipend to a livable wage and allow them to go on with their lives. And so I'm really interested in programs that are able to deliver for that.
What about the issue of the wages that, inmates are actually working with these large corporations at the prisons, and they're getting paid very little money. The least they can do is hire them when they come out.
And you are absolutely correct. We're working with that. In late 18, early 19, we partner with the Streets Department and Workforce Development, where we have a cohort of work release inmates that are working at the auto shops, and they're doing training with the hope that once they develop up their skills, they'll be released as a cohort, and they can then test for city employment. If they pass that, then they will become city employees. This is groundbreaking. They are receiving more than the $1.50 per day that the inmates receive on State Road. I've also made a request for increased pay for the inmate workers. So it would require an increase of $1.50 per day. Again, it's educating folks not just to simply increase the wage, but to also give them access to financial literacy on how best to manage that money, save the money while they're there, Some inmates have paid bail based on their inmate work pay. As you stated before, if bail is eliminated, they can then save that money to transition out and be in a better situation and position once they release. They can provide for themselves housing, clothing, and the basic necessities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ross, for increasing our budget for this. So now, once we get that information, we're responsible for it.
Thank you.
And we will bring that to the attention. And there might be laws on the books already dealing with our minimum wage issues. And we've made a bold statement about bringing people up to a living wage. Well, there might be a way to hold that money, pay off fees, whatever court costs, and apply it to some of the restoration. So we're going to take a look at that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just good. So I'll start with my bias because I love Commissioner. I love everything she does, and I wanted to echo what the Chief Defender was saying. When you talk about leadership and you putting a round peg in a round hole, I can't tell you, for those who are listening in this audience, and there are going to be many people who may see this on video, this is the real deal. This is what happens when somebody steps up and takes leadership by the helm and not afraid to take risks and not afraid to say, yes, I can be a tough commissioner with 4 stars, but I can have the humanity and the respect and the dignity that everyone deserves. And so I would be remiss if I didn't say to you, before you walked away, how much I appreciate you. I idolize the work you do from afar. You are doing it the way it should be done. Is the way that people should be looking at this problem and this issue. And so I just want to personally commend you. I'm sure I share that with my colleagues and all those who are looking at you. When you look at this person here, this is someone who's doing it the way it should be done in a proper way, and for that I commend you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner, I know you didn't have a chance to respond to the Inquirer's reporting on the high use of pepper spray at Riverside. So could you respond to that now, please? Thank you.
Ms. Schubert. Richards, thank you. So there was an article that was in the Inquirer this week regarding the reporting of overuse of pepper spray. So in a correctional environment, pepper spray is the minimal amount of force necessary to gain compliance. We understand that women come with a myriad of challenges, and the first goal is always to engage the individual to de-escalate. De-escalate by interacting with them, giving them verbal commands, or sometimes separating them if they get in a physical altercation. We have to be able to separate folks immediately and stop any further injury that may result of them fighting. So the prisons was portrayed that we just go around and we pepper spray folks. That's not it. It's de-escalation. And we were at the forefront again, making change. In 2018, initiated in our partnership with the National Institute of Corrections, I implemented our training academy to start crisis intervention training. That gave the correctional officers and multidisciplinary staff the opportunity to understand what someone goes through when they're in a crisis, when they're hearing voices because there is mental illness present. And that has decreased our rate of pepper spray. The first is de-escalation, first and foremost, always. When it continues and we've exhausted de-escalation tactics, pepper spray, which is a water-based solution made up of food-grade ingredients, similar to hot sauce. We use that to disperse, separate, secure, and get people the treatment that they need. Now, when we say treatment, sometimes it may be a scratch, but we check everyone out, we evaluate, and we investigate every single use of force. But also it's twofold. It keeps the inmate population safe, and it keeps the staff safe, because we don't want physical use of forces. And so if you spray, you disperse, you decontaminate by flushing of the eyes. Medical contractors take a look, assess, render any medical care if necessary, and we track and investigate every single use of force. We knew we did not have crisis intervention training. We implemented that. Why? Because we wanted the inmate population to be safe, and we wanted the staff to be safe. We wanted to know that de-escalation works. You can talk to people and de-escalate. You can ask them, what's going on with you? How can I help you? Is something going on when you hang up the phone? Versus get off the phone. Now it's like, hey, what happened? My brother just got shot. Okay, let me get you help now. That's part of that de-escalation. And the staff have taken, such a hold of it that it's even boggled the inmate population that observe when staff go in those units and they're talking to folks that are clearly in a crisis. And the goal is to de-escalate with the minimal use of force. And I appreciate you asking that question, because these are all of the efforts that are underway. Again, Prison Rape Elimination Act, I have zero tolerance. It's not just an act. The staff hear me say, it starts with me, zero tolerance. We will treat people with dignity and respect. We investigate all allegations, and if it's founded, discipline is rendered. Zero tolerance.
Yes, ma'am. Can I just say something, ask you something? I know you're the HWC. You have how many more women that are in positions of leadership?
Okay. So we have 2 female wardens,
Okay.
and we have 2 human service program administrator. We have a training academy director. We have recently a director of education, because I'm concerned that women take advantage of educational opportunities prior to release. I want to increase those numbers of educational attainment, so that's one less barrier that they have to worry about when we're partnering and presenting job opportunities.
So we're going to let the HWC,
Head woman in charge.
so that the other panelists can.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. And actually, before I continue with my prepared testimony, I want to say how fortunate I am to be sitting next to you today, and how fortunate we are here in the city of Philadelphia to have a commissioner of prisons who comes from a background of restorative justice as opposed to punitive justice. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
So now I have to put on my glasses. Good morning, Chairman Jones and members of the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. I am Javita Hill. I am Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Engagement for Women and the Philadelphia Commission for Women, and I appreciate this opportunity to testify today. Our office is committed to a social justice agenda that promotes civic, educational, and economic policies that enhance the lives of women and girls. Our office is under the Mayor's Office of Public Engagement, that includes the Office of Civic Engagement and Volunteer Services, the Office of Black Male Engagement, the Office of Youth Engagement, the Millennial Advisory Committee, and the Mayor's Commission on Asian American Affairs. We are committed to approaching public policy from an intersectional lens that respects and considers the variables of race, ethnicity, class, gender, gender expression, age, disability, and even zip codes as some of the many ways that influence how we experience inequality. Our office embraces a participatory stakeholder model of meaningful public engagement that informs, consults, involves, collaborates, and ultimately empowers the end users of our public engagement. And to put this more simply, and relevant to why we are here today, is that our advocacy on behalf of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women is informed by the women themselves. We believe that women with lived experience are the experts in providing the most astute policy and legislative recommendations that would improve outcomes. An example of this is an article that was featured in our 2018 annual report entitled Women's Bill of Rights, a Blueprint for Keeping Women Free, written by lead authors Faith Bartley, who was one of our poets today, Latira Blake, who you heard from today, and Teresa Saunders. with contributions from Latanya T. Myers and Nikki Lee Smith, with assistance from Courtney Bowles and Mark Strandquist from the People's Paper Co-op. Their recommendations included ending cash bail, more transitional housing options that would allow women to live with their families in PHA homes, fair employment offering a living wage, education opportunities, including banning the box from college and university applications, more lenient family reunification policies so that incarcerated mothers have more time to spend with their children, and the need for mentoring during incarceration and after release. Our report was distributed to each council member earlier in the year, and as required by law, was delivered to the chief clerk. Our 2018 report is also available online. I attended a conference recently hosted by Maternity Care Coalition and the Stoneleigh Foundation, and I was stunned by the statistic that 81% of incarcerated women in Philadelphia are awaiting trial and have not been convicted. Let me repeat that. Most of the women who are sitting at Riverside are awaiting trial. They've not been convicted. And so when you couple this with 80% of incarcerated women who are also mothers, you have a system that exacerbates the impact of incarceration on women and their children. It is as if children are serving a prison term along with their mothers. I think we can do better than this. I urge this body to listen to the suggestions from formerly incarcerated women. Hear their stories, hear their recommendations about the support services they need to be whole. Let them know that you support policies and resources for them to live their lives with dignity that is deserving of all human beings. I urge that the criminal justice reforms that this committee champions are those that are restorative rather than punitive. Reforms that place a priority on family unification rather than family separation. For too long, the circumstances and needs of incarcerated women have remained in the shadows. Thank you for this opportunity for bringing these issues into the light.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilman has gone for a comfort break. I will ask for the next panelist, Judge Semin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and discuss this really important issue with you. This is an issue that I've been involved with since 1964, when I became the first woman ever to be hired as a staff member at the Defender Association of Philadelphia. The first thing I noticed—
Shout out to that, just saying.
The first thing I noticed was that there was a law in the books that required women to be sentenced, if they were convicted of a felony, to the maximum sentence allowed by law. You're probably shocked to hear that. I was shocked to find that out. I was also shocked to find out that nobody had ever done anything about it. So I was able to bring cases and have that law, the Muncie Act, declared unconstitutional. There's a whole long, interesting history about how women eventually got to be sentenced on the same law that applied to men. It took a while, but we were in the end successful because a man decided that he would like to be sentenced under the Muncie Act, and because theoretically under that act, it never happened, but theoretically you could be paroled the day after you were sentenced because there was no minimum sentence, only a flat maximum sentence. And when a man asked to be sentenced under the Muncie Act, the Supreme Court finally said, enough of this, everybody will be sentenced under the same law. But it's very interesting that women have always been on the short end of the criminal justice system. And one of the reasons is that despite the fact that there has been this enormous increase in incarcerated women, anywhere from 700 to 800% increase between the start of the war on drugs, which was the cause of a lot of it in the 70s and the late 90s, The numbers are going down now for everything, so fortunately. But despite that, they still only comprise about 10% of the total prison population. So compared to men, this is true in Philadelphia. If you look at how many women are incarcerated compared to how many men, women are about 10%. And that's true nationally. And because of that, women have been declared to be statistically insignificant. This is a phrase I learned when I was general counsel and secretary of the State Parole Board back in the 70s, and I was at a meeting about grants. We used to have something called LEAA, the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, which was a federal entity that gave money to almost anybody in the criminal justice system who could come up with an idea. There was a lot of money, and it was freely available. And I was at a meeting about how the state system could use the money and have programs. And I sat through 3/4 of the meeting and raised my hand and said, I haven't heard anything about programs for women. And that's when I was told, oh, women are statistically insignificant, meaning there's not enough of them to make it worthwhile to have programs specially designed for them. Now, thank goodness we are beyond that stage now, and we have a commissioner who is a woman herself and who is very aware of women's special needs and special problems. And I'm happy to report that now, for the first time, our office is taking action directly to address these problems. District Attorney Krasner has asked me to head a task force to ensure access to justice for women and girls, and we have embarked on a year-long mission to gather the necessary data to deal with such subjects as who are the women who become involved in the system, what is their life experience, how do our sentencing practices discriminate against women, when we treat women the same as we treat men, are we actually treating them unequally? Because it's been pointed out by people over the years that equal treatment is not the same as appropriate treatment. And treating people the same doesn't mean you're treating them equally, especially when you compare the differences between women and men who get involved in the criminal justice system. We all know, yes, there are some that are the same. There are violent women just like there are violent men, and there are women who enjoy embarking on a life of crime, like economic crimes and things of that nature, and we understand that. But when you look at the women who end up in prison, these women share a common life experience usually, which they have all been the subject of some kind of abuse, psychological, physical, sexual, sometimes all three. They all have very low self-worth, which makes it very difficult to make them believe that they're entitled to be better than they are. Some people who work in the prisons have told me that it's difficult sometimes to get women to come to the programs that are available because a lot of them just don't feel entitled, if you can imagine that. We want to look at what prison rules, regulation, and practices need to be changed to really treat women equally. Do the staff of women's prisons need specialized training in dealing with trauma? Do we really need to incarcerate pregnant women? Do we have to incarcerate lactating women? I think the fact that the commissioner has brought about a program where women can share their breast milk with their infants by having it transported to them and so forth is certainly very good. But wouldn't it be better if the babies were there? There are 7 prisons in 7 states that do have nurseries in their prisons, and we're looking at them to see if there's some sort of model that we can bring to Pennsylvania. There are other countries where children can be housed in a very nice situation and go to school with their mothers in prison. Italy is one of them. So we're looking at other countries as well. Other people have spoken this morning about the problems of separating mothers and children, and I'm not going to elaborate on that. You know about that. We criticize the Trump administration for separating families, and yet we're doing the same thing in many ways. So we have to stop doing that, and we have to look for alternatives. We have to look for alternatives to incarceration for single parents of minor children, and we're looking at that. We're speaking with the people who founded something called Drew House in Brooklyn, where mothers and children can live together even though the mothers are technically incarcerated. We're looking at the programs in women's prisons to see if they're designed to really practically reintegrate them into society. We're looking at how our women's prisons compare to the men's prisons. For instance, we have women Philadelphians at Muncie, and Muncie is 3 hours from here, and there is no public transportation available that goes there. So that the women who go there are really isolated from their families. Also, women in prison usually suffer from lack of a support system because their mothers and grandmothers and aunts are busy taking care of their children and don't have time to visit them, where our men who are in prison have a whole support group made up of all the women in their family. So there are really significant differences between women and men. And I am personally now looking into something that I hope will be a partial solution about all of our women in state custody having to be so far away from their families. We're also engaging with other institutions such as Ardella House and people in New York and other places to help us accomplish and look for solutions to these problems. I look forward to the opportunity to come back a year from now and maybe report on significant progress that we've made in this area. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Any questions?
Yeah. Thank you so much. One, thank you for all of your leadership. Judge Temin, thank you so much for your leadership and, of course, for being the first woman at the Defender Association, which is near and dear to my heart. But I do want to say this. As a member of this criminal justice stakeholder group, and I really took to heart what you said, Ms. Hill, about the women that are in there pretrial. None of our organizations are beyond reproach, and I will say that the Defender Association can play a better role in ensuring that people are brought to trial timely. And so these are the things that we are looking at in our system, in our structure, in our organization. Are there unnecessary delays? And if there are, we will hold people accountable as well. And I know that doesn't always make us the most popular, executive directors, but it's necessary. So I think it's important for leaders to recognize that we're not perfect and we have work to do, and we can't sugarcoat some of the things that our own office is perpetuating that really cause some of these issues. So I am speaking honestly about those things, and these are the things that we need to make sure that we step up and do better.
Judge Temin, I've always admired your leadership and your judicial acumen. You know, it's a funny thing. I was involved in a group with State Representative Waters, where a lot of women who had men that were incarcerated, they got together in a group and they arranged for buses to take themselves and their children up to the prison. At that time it was Graterford, to see their men and to have the interaction of the children with the men in quality time. And I just don't ever see something like that happening for the women, or is it happening? That you're correct. You need to have that support, and when you have women that are up there at Muncie, you need that kind of organization where it's a joining together to take families out to see them and to have that good interactive time with them. It's just my observation.
I don't know of any effort there. There used to be an organization of actually past prisoners, men mostly, who did organize a bus that would be used to transport families to visit prisoners. That was a long time ago, and as far as I know, it's not being done now.
Yeah. You haven't seen anything, Commissioner?
I'm just aware that the PA Prison Society is coordinating that effort to the state, and we have worked with the PA Prison Society for when the Uber drivers do come onto campus. They're designated to an area where there's easy identification where they can be dropped off and picked up. So it's between the coordination with the Uber for PA Prison Society and then the folks using SEPTA or private personal vehicles, but not a bus, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's something that we really need to look into.
So we have a couple of panels that are waiting, so I want to make sure that I say thank you so much. And Judge Timmon, I would love to work with District Attorney Krasner on really getting a diversionary program for women who have been domestically abused and have come into this system with a new charge related to that. I think he said that he would do that, and I really would love to move forward on that. Now is the time, so I really appreciate your testimony.
So we would love to clap, but we're too dignified to do that, but there's a virtual clap happening right now. All right? Y'all can clap, though.
Can we have Margaret Zhang and Evan Thornburg?
And thank you all for sticking around. We appreciate it. This information does not go into a black hole. It goes into the thought processes of everyone on this commission and the other council people in this chambers, because that's my job to convey that policy once I hear about it. So welcome. In any order you'd like, state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Margaret Zhang. Good morning, Councilman Jones, other council members, and member of the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. On behalf of the Women's Law Project, I want to thank you, thank City Council for the opportunity to be here and to convene this hearing on this important issue, the needs of incarcerated women. As I said, my name is Margaret, and I'm a staff attorney at the Women's Law Project. We're a nonprofit legal advocacy organization with offices here in Philly and Pittsburgh. We seek to advance the legal status of women, girls, and LGBTQ individuals through impact litigation and policy advocacy. We've worked throughout the years to improve conditions for incarcerated women. We've previously represented a class of women contesting unconstitutional and unsafe prison conditions at Muncie. We later represented incarcerated women prisoners seeking compensation for deliberate indifference here in Philly, which had led to an undiagnosed and untreated spread of a drug-resistant staph infection that disproportionately affected those women. We've represented 2 pregnant incarcerated women in civil rights lawsuit, one whose preterm baby died as a result of the city's failure to provide timely medical treatment, and one who was shackled during childbirth while at Cambridge Springs. We also have supported the adoption of the Healthy Birth for Incarcerated Women Act in 2010. So we appreciate being asked to be here. I want to acknowledge that we have made progress as a city. As we've heard, the number of women in custody has dramatically decreased. We're under 400 from more than 800 just a few years ago. And you heard about the Mom Mobile at Riverside with Maternity Care Coalition. That is singular and unique and wonderful that we have that here in Philadelphia. I do want to highlight, though, that there is still more to be done. Philadelphia should continue to decrease the number of women who are incarcerated. That 80% number should really go down. The 80% of women who are at Riverside are pretrial. That means they they're not serving a sentence for a crime. So obviously that needs to change. For those who remain incarcerated, though, I just want to use the remainder of my time to highlight ways that we can improve conditions of confinement for these women, and particularly for those who are pregnant or postpartum. So this is going to be a host of issues, and I know there's a lot of proposals out there to address them, but I just want to give you the range of things that we should be thinking about as we're thinking about incarcerated women. So first, compared to incarcerated men, our women are at an inherent disadvantage because they have to pay for female-specific necessities like bras and feminine hygiene products. What's important about that is not just the cost, but also the inherent power disadvantage that puts them at, where women, even if they might not have to pay, they still have to ask for these products that they need. And that creates the potential for embarrassment, humiliation, and abuse. There was a question about sexual assault earlier. Yes, it does happen. There was a case that was litigated at the Third Circuit. It's the ED versus Sharkey case up in Berks County. A woman was sexually assaulted. This does happen because you're in a situation where someone has disproportionate power over you. You're asking for some feminine hygiene products, and they say, yeah, I can give that to you, but you're going to have to give me something else in return. And so these are conditions that are simple. We can change them, and we can make it so that that's not an inherent power advantage that's being used to women's detriment. Second, incarcerated women require trauma-informed and specialized medical care, including mental health and substance use treatment, as well as gynecologic, obstetric, and abortion care. Third, incarcerated women, and particularly those who are pregnant, they should receive exercise opportunities, adequate nutrition, and other health-related accommodations. Fourth, pregnant and postpartum women face dangerous complications from the use of restraints, such as shackling, and also the pepper spray issue that we heard about earlier today. Fifth, incarcerated women often can't breastfeed their children. We do benefit here from the program at Riverside, but it would be great if there was some way for women and babies to stay together so they wouldn't have to ship that breast milk out. Sixth, incarcerated women are often more likely than incarcerated men to be parents and primary caretakers. You've heard that already. And we need to improve the opportunities for them to spend time with their children. I agree with whoever said earlier that this improves recidivism rates, and it really should be something we should be encouraging because that continuity of relationship is so important. And I want to address the point made earlier about causes of the rise in incarcerated women. It is true that most women are nonviolent offenders, and it's been fueled by this continued criminalization of minor drug offenses. And so I think even compared to the incarcerated men population, most of these women are not there for a violent crime. And for that reason, we should be doing all we can to continue to allow them to interact with the outside world. Seventh and finally, I just want to touch on reentry. This is a perilous time for formerly incarcerated women, and we need to take all the steps we can to promote successful reentry. In today's opioid epidemic, that is all the more important because right after their release, that's when they're at the highest risk of death from drug overdose. And so if we can get them access to medication-assisted treatment on the inside, that's been associated with an 85% reduction in drug-related fatalities in the first month after release. So overall, in responding to the myriad challenges that these women face, I would encourage you, City Council, and all these stakeholders to work together along with our local incarcerated women's working group to enact policies and to enact change that would meaningfully improve these conditions of confinement for incarcerated women. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Seeing no questions, please begin state your name for the record.
Yes, so good morning, esteemed committee members. My name is Evan Thornburg. My pronouns are she, her. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs for the Kenney administration. I have come before you today to give some general insight and information that pertains to the experience of LGBTQ individuals in incarceration. This issue is one that I have strongly invested in over the course of my entire tenure here at the city, and I'm excited to see the committee engaging in the process of digging into the complexity of it and what needs to be done to improve these spaces so that they can bring reformation. According to the 2011-2012 National Inmate Survey, the latest survey done by the Bureau of Justice, and was administered to over 92,000 incarcerated individuals that were 16 and older, housed in adult prisons, jails, ICE, and military facilities. LGBTQ individuals are incarcerated at a rate of about 1,800, nearly 1,900 in 100,000, which is 3 times the national rate of the general U.S. population. 42% of women in prison and nearly 36% of women in jail identified as a sexual minority, and that is having had a sexual or romantic experience with someone who has the same gender identity as them. In both prison and jail, lesbian and bisexual women were sentenced to longer periods of time than their straight identified counterparts. Also to just note that bisexual women between the ages of about 13 to 24 are at the highest rate of domestic violence. LGBTQ individuals are substantially more likely to be subjugated to solitary confinement, with 28% of currently incarcerated lesbian, gay, and bisexual people being placed in isolation within the past year.
For trans individuals, this placement is frequently not connected to issues of their own behavior, but rather for protection from the general population, but has a deleterious effect on their mental well-being and can affect the outcome of their sentencing. Solitary confinement limits an individual's ability to access any number of support services, programs, and resources that are available to them, and not utilizing them can give the appearance to a judge that these individuals are not committed to their own reformation process. Transgender people are almost 10 times as likely to be sexually assaulted while incarcerated, with an estimated 40% reporting a sexual assault in prison or jail in the last year. When housed with men, as is frequently the protocol, trans women are 13 times more likely than any of the men they're housed with to be sexually assaulted. These assaults are perpetrated by both other inmates and staff. The statistics I have presented that are specific to LGBTQ individuals are bleak, but it would be remiss of me if I did not also clearly state that other general issues brought up today of incarceration in the justice system plague this community severely too, such as cash bail and how that punishes the poor, of which trans women of color and cisgender queer women of color are likely to identify as, particularly in a city like Philadelphia, where we have such a high poverty rate. The hypercriminalization and punishing of sex workers, homeless individuals, immigrants, victims of domestic violence, and those suffering from addiction and mental health issues, as well as the lack of sentencing alternatives like diversion programs that are competent and willing to enroll LGBTQ individuals. Many diversion programs do not or openly admit they are not competent or not willing to take specifically trans folks. The research done and compiled on incarceration at all echelons of government has shown repeatedly that LGBTQ individuals, particularly those with challenges of mental health and of color, are overrepresented in this population, will serve substantially longer periods of time, be held in isolation, and likely be the targets of sexual assault. With this information, I encourage those here today to push for progress and reform as it applies to policies, standards of care, and alternative programs like diversionary programs that specifically target and understand this population's needs in our justice and prison systems. Thank you for providing me this time to speak. I am open to any of the committee members' questions at this time.
So my question, it's not really a question, it's an ask. I thank you for your testimony because that is enlightening information. I know we represent people in the LGBT community, and I think that it would be great if you gave Defense Counsel a tutorial or a lesson on some of the things that the trans population does not have access to. So when we go before a judge with mitigation and information so that the decision makers can make these important decisions, we understand the context by which the people that we are representing are either disengaged or disenfranchised from really meaningful, positive, pro-social activities. And so I think that this is an education piece, not just for the council to do something about it in terms of legislatively or even funding, but this is also a practical and practice issue that I think that everyone who is representing anyone in this justice system needs to understand. So we would love to engage you even more on the, just for education on these issues so that we can be better advocates.
Absolutely.
If I can make one suggestion, when I worked at the prisons, I taught diversity, and we have in-service trainings at the prisons, and it would be very good to have the LGBT community present in-service training so they can lift awareness among the staff there.
Mm-hmm. I will say at the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs, as well as, which is housed in the Mayor's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we have comprehensive curriculum-based training and competency training that we've designed and that we retrofit to the spaces and departments that we present it to. We've currently trained a good portion or substantial portion of over 5,000 individuals at the city. And so that is something we're able to roll out with ease. We do all of the new recruits at the police academy and all first responders and the fire department as they are engaged in promotion. So that is something that we would love to be able to provide and also provide to any number of folks who work within the city, but also closely with the city or contract with the city.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony. It doesn't just go to city council or its budget, but it filters out to people who have these kinds of responsibilities all over the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Williams, will you please read the next panel to testify?
Judge Lloyd Dumas, Marianne Frey, Rachel Henderson, and Jasmine Smith.
And thank you all for your patience once again. Please come up to the table, have a seat. So, now? All right. So, I think this is the last panel, but I don't want time to escape for us to make this announcement that Julie Wertheimer, who has been on this commission from before the beginning, has an announcement kind of to make, and I'm gonna put her on the spot to make it, because I'm doing it in protest, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is with a lot of mixed feelings that I will be leaving my post at the city in 2 weeks' time. It has been a privilege to serve the people of Philadelphia, serve on this committee and in many other roles with incredible partners both within the government agencies and in the community advocates who keep us informed and hold us accountable as we try to make this a better place. And so I will miss this a lot. It's a tough decision to leave, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to have done all the work that we accomplished together.
And speaking of all the work, how much money did the city raise towards reform efforts during your tenure? I'm putting you on the spot.
A total amount is hard to
Rough guess.
take off the top of my head. We have $7.65 million that we've gotten from the MacArthur Foundation since 2015. There have been numerous grants from sources like PCCD that have supported other efforts, whether it be front-end diversion or work that the Chief Defender's Office is doing with kids in education. It's in the millions, and it's greatly increased our capacity to make much-needed change.
And what was the census population of inmates on River Road when you got here, and what is it now?
Well, when I got here, that was in the phase where it was close to 10,000 on some days.
Right, yes.
And we are below 5,000 now.
So I'm going to relax the rules on clapping. Let's give her a round.
Julie, it's been a pleasure working with you over these last 4 years. So I'm really shocked to hear that, but it's been an interesting ride, and we've done some really amazing things.
Thank you. Yeah, this is it's definitely a team effort from all the agencies and all the community members. This work doesn't get done by any one person or one entity, and it's hard, and we got to keep doing it. And I'll be watching enthusiastically from the sidelines. So.
We hope you we wish you great success. And we hope you're not just watching, but funding some of the things we're doing.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed working with you on the various committees that we've been on. You know, it's really been a pleasure, and I'm going to miss you. Your great disposition.
Thank you.
And your leadership. Subtle leadership.
So with that in mind, guys, please, in whatever order you'd like, maybe I'm going to take the prerogative and ask the judge to go first, if you would. Grab the mic, bring the mic, and then state your name for the record. You're familiar with this, all right?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Dumas. I am currently a Court of Common Pleas judge here in Philadelphia. I am assigned to the civil division, the trial division, and assigned to civil cases at this time. Thank you for the opportunity to provide just a few words or thoughts about juveniles. I did serve in the juvenile court for approximately 16 years. So I will say that that's where my passion and my experience lies, and my heart is still there, which is the reason why I agreed to come today, just to share a little bit about my thoughts and my findings of the current status of the resources available for females that are in the juvenile system. Throughout the course of my tenure on the bench in family court, I've watched resources dwindle, especially for females. When I came, there was a disparity in services that were available for females, but the disparity grew as services began to dwindle to the point where when I asked some stakeholders in preparation for this hearing today about the current status of resources for juveniles. I'm going to read my 2 questions that I asked, one from an administrator in probation and one from an administrator from the DA's office. And the question was, are there any female-specific programs serving adjudicated youth through family court? The answer from the administrator in probation was none. When I asked the administrator from the DA's office, tell me about programs that are being utilized for adjudicated female youth, the response was, there are currently no specific girls programs through family court. So what does that mean? We know we have young ladies that come through the court, both on the dependent side and the delinquent side, but if we're talking about criminal justice, we're talking about those on the juvenile justice side. So we're talking about young ladies, and right now there are currently 14 females in placement, 24 are held at the Juvenile Justice Center, and there are roughly about another 300 or so on probation. I'm sure that Ms. Henderson will be able to either corroborate or not those figures that I received just yesterday. So that stood out to me first and foremost because I thought that those numbers were very low. So either they're not being arrested, or the ones that are being arrested are either going through diversion programs or they're being placed on probation. But even wherever they fall, the question is, are their needs really being met? I would dare say not, because if we don't have the programming, then even probation, what does that look like? What does that mean? Does that mean that a young lady just has a probation officer that she's checking in with every now and then? How does that address the fact that I believe philosophically every child that comes through the halls of the juvenile justice system are traumatized in some way? So studies have shown that girls that are in the juvenile justice system clearly have experienced some trauma. So if they're already, whether they're in placement or on probation or even through a diversion program, what is being offered to them to truly address the trauma that has impacted them to the point that they end up in our system? Because you and I, all of us know that juveniles who are impacted by trauma become adults impacted by trauma. So we have, through juvenile court, and I always believe we had the unique opportunity to really to make the difference between the life or that transition from being a juvenile to an adult if we did what we were supposed to do. The problem is that we have a lot of people in the system, when I was there, and I know who are still there, that are very passionate about providing the services that our young people need so that they can move into adulthood trauma-free or trauma-less. But we're just people without services that are truly impactful. And we all know we've had services, we've had providers who say they can do this and say they can do that. But the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the outcomes. And when we see, and I know that we have numbers of arrests are down and things of that nature, and even when I was there, and we would always, hear that, well, arrests are down. Well, we weren't seeing any less young people in our courtrooms. So I'm not really sure where the numbers, how they kind of, meshed with what we were seeing, but what we were seeing were families who were dysfunctional and families who had children with significant needs that could not be met. And the reason why they could not be met is because the services that existed then and the services that don't exist now are not available to truly meet the needs of these kids who are traumatized. They're traumatized by their home lives, they're traumatized by their communities, they're traumatized by what happens in their schools. And unless we are really serious about impacting criminal justice, unless we are really serious about reforming criminal justice, we've got to get them young. We've got to use the systems that we have to really make the impact. And without services that really mean what they say and do what they say that they're supposed to do, which definitely includes trauma-informed care from the time they walk into the door until the time they walk out. Everybody in our system needs to be trained on trauma-informed care. And I know that these are kind of buzzwords that are being kind of thrown out into the air, lots of times, but they have a true meaning. And if you have professionals that really understand what trauma-informed care is, trauma-informed care, it's not just about how we handle kids, it's about what the atmosphere is like when they walk in the front door, how they're treated by the staff when they come in, how their parents are treated, how they're talked to, what the ambiance of the room is. And I realize that, we're talking about a paradigm shift as it relates to our system. But what I experienced in family court and what I continue to see even now sitting on the sidelines is that we say a lot, but until we actually start doing, our children are not going to get any better. And that, and that's from top down, leadership on down. We have to really mean that we are creating a philosophy where we are truly helping the people that we say that we want to help. And so what I'm hoping is that from these hearings, that we are able to really, or that you are able to make recommendations that really speak to the heart of why our children aren't getting any better. So, thank you.
I'm not going to ask you any questions because your statements speak for themselves. I'll let Mr. Rojas ask the question, but I just want to thank you for taking the time away from civil to come back and refresh what you've learned over the last 15 years. And if I take nothing away from what you said, is paradigm shift. We once were more Quaker-oriented in our justice application for the children's benefit. And what we've drifted away from in that regard is a pipeline from childhood to adult. I'll never forget when you, Defender, said, some of the clients you saw as their advocates, you wound up representing in courtroom. And if that's the case, we can cut them off at the pass, if you would, by providing better care on the term that I've now attributed to you, pre-entry. Yes. Pre-entry. Brother Bethel over there sat, I think, right here and did a 20-minute tirade.
I don't do tirades.
I'll never forget. And totally changed how fees and fines were appropriated to poor folk who had to manage some of these children in crisis in your courts. So understand what you're telling us actually does trickle into public policy. So we're grateful for that sharing. Your Honor.
And Judge Dumas, I have a question for you.
Yes.
The School District of Philadelphia is responsible for the education of children and young adults who are direct file to provide the education. My wife was the psychologist at the Youth Study Center. And that was through the School District of Philadelphia. What else is the School District of Philadelphia doing to address some of the issues that you just raised? Are you aware?
That's a great question. What I would say, and maybe Rachel in her presentation will have some more answers, but I will say that the time that I was there, the school district provided little partnerships, involvement with our youth. They did the bare minimum as it related to education. At one point, they were sort of involved in the truancy project that we had, but that dwindled away. And I will tell you that it really depends on the administration at the time. That determines how involved the other stakeholders are actually participating with our at-risk youth. Our at-risk youth are sort of in a box. and the other stakeholders kind of decide how much they're going to participate depending on the leadership and depending on the philosophy. I can remember being a very new judge, and Vallis was, at the time, he was in charge of the school district, and he came to family court and he provided this elaborate structure of what the school district's priorities were. And I remember, because Judge Doherty, Justice Doherty now, but Judge Doherty at the time was the administrative judge. And so we looked at each other at the end of the end of the presentation and I asked, what happens to, or what category or place do our children here fit in? And his response candidly was, well, actually there is no place for them. So mind you, that was Vallis. He's no longer in charge, but I have not necessarily seen a whole major shift from that philosophy as it relates to the school district.
I just want to thank you so much, Judge. I know we worked together when I was a young public defender, and you still are a tireless advocate for these youth, and especially our girls. And I want to echo the sentiment of the lack of program, the lack of enrichment program, and that's why I'm so glad that Jasmine Smith is here to really offer some solutions, because what's been tough, as the public defender's office, we've been going out combing the streets. What do you have? And bringing it to a court. And the problem is getting it to be consistent in the programming options for courts to say, hey, we found something that matches this and suits this young lady's challenges, needs, and of course, prospects of them being a young, well-adjusted woman.
Yes.
And I'm really, really interested in how do we bring programs, and I'm going to shut up soon, so I want Jasmine to really talk about it. How do we bring programs to light so that the probation department can be funneling kids into these pro-social activities that really, really work? You have women like Jasmine who are just like, she gets it, and she has these young ladies, and they are confident, they are fearless, they are tireless, and they are going to be our future leaders. So I really would love for our city council to really get with whoever the decision makers for the programming, to bring new programming in, bring people in to talk about their programs and how it's been working, because sometimes we have program providers that we don't hold accountable for. Are the recidivism rates going down? Are the youth being more well-adjusted in schools, their behavior at home? That's what we need to really focus on. And so I'm just looking forward to the rest of the panel's discussion.
Yes. So leadership of the court as well as leadership of DHS both have to be open to partnerships with community partners.
I need you to repeat that for the record.
Leadership of the courts as well as of DHS have to be open to partnerships with community agencies and entities that are providing the services. There are community services out there. My daughter was in one of in Jasmine's program for a little while, and so I understand the importance of working with the community, but I'm not in charge. So those who are in charge have to embrace outsiders who are passionate and willing and able to do the work. And because we can't do it in a vacuum. The system can't do it by itself. If we don't make ourselves available to the community and to people who live and work and are passionate about the community, then we miss out on several opportunities to really make the impact that we say we want to make.
Don't be stealing my mic, man. No, the judge. I got to defer to the judge. You see how he takes the mic?
No, Lori, you're so totally correct. You don't know the issues that I went through to remain on this committee through court leadership. It was something that was done for the first time, and it was. So you are totally correct. It has to be an open mind on both sides, and that's one of the reasons why I write about criminal justice reform, because from the judicial side. And the prison side, it's so important for our society to right these wrongs that have taken place with so many people within it, from the children and the families all the way up. You know, you're so totally correct.
Thanks, Joe.
Just real quick, I just want to,
Thank you, my brother.
no, I've deferred, now I'm taking it back. But Judge, obviously I want to thank you for your support of my work
Yes.
and the work I've done. But I guess my question to you is, I know you also advocated around human trafficking.
Yes.
Has that kind of, we miss you in the juvenile side, as you know.
I miss it too.
Is that no longer a part, I know it's not been a part of the dialogue today, but I know that was also a passion of yours as well.
So Rachel actually was part of the team
Okay.
that started Rap Court. I don't know if she's going to talk about it. Rap Court does exist. I will say that just like anything, when you have a leadership, every leader is different. And so the fire around the issue of human trafficking as it relates to juveniles in Philadelphia and through family court is a little, it's different because the leader is different and everybody leads differently. What I will say is that my hopes for the Rap Court, which is working to restore adolescents' power, that my hope for that was that the court would be much further in its impact than it is right now. The court does still exist. I don't have an opportunity to participate anymore because of my change in assignment. And so I have to do my work outside of the court system. So, but the stakeholders never really got the opportunity to fully work together as a team to make the impact that we should be making as it relates to the issue. So I'm hoping that will change and that, it will pick up some speed again and create positive outcomes for human trafficking survivors. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's afternoon now, so.
It is, definitely.
Yep. So good afternoon, and thank you, Representative Cephas, who I think has left now, Councilman Jones, and members.
She's right there.
Oh, I didn't see. Thank you. Yeah, she was stealth back there. And members of the Special Council on Justice Reform for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Marianne Frey, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for Maternity Care Coalition that has been referenced a couple times throughout the day. And since 2006, MCC has worked in partnership with the Philadelphia Department of Prisons, as you heard from Commissioner Carney earlier, to provide mom-mobile services to pregnant women and moms with young children at Riverside Correctional Facility. Research on child development has clearly demonstrated that it is best for mother and baby to be together during the first 3 years of life. We heard poignant testimony earlier when we were hearing from the women in the first panel. I firmly believe that whenever possible, pregnant and newly parenting mothers should not be incarcerated. Instead, we should provide access to diversion programming that includes evidence-based home visiting that supports and promotes the success of the mother and the bond between her and her children. The Mom-Mobile program at the Riverside Correctional Facility is designed to meet the unique needs of mothers during their time of incarceration and for up to 1 year after release. Our program includes educational groups for pregnant women and new moms, individual case management services, and support for babies' caregivers. In collaboration with the Philadelphia Department of Prisons, we have also established a unique program for women who deliver a baby while incarcerated, which includes a doula or labor support, and the opportunity to express breast milk and transport it to the baby. Upon release from Riverside, we transition to a home visiting model in which we support mothers in accessing community-based services and benefits and assist mothers in reuniting with their children. The goal of our program is to help women stay connected to their children. One MCC client, Ayana, was on her way to earning a business degree at Philadelphia Community College when she was arrested, leaving behind a son. The day she also found out that she was 3 months pregnant.
While serving time at Riverside, Ayanna was determined to stay strong for the sake of her son and new baby. So she enrolled in our Momobile program. Ayanna's incarceration was particularly difficult for her young son. She was, I quote, she said, I quote, "It was really hard because he would cry. Then he'd write me letters, and I'd write letters through Momobile. His dad was going through a thing too because he was used to me being around. It was hard for both of them," unquote. Ayanna served a few months while awaiting trial, and we heard about the very long time that so many of the women at the Riverside Correctional Facility are there before they're actually go to trial, and was ultimately released once the charges were dropped. Ayanna gave birth shortly after her release, and she was on the phone with her MCC advocate, Bridget, during the birth of her baby. Ayanna's story is just one example of the impact of incarceration on mothers and families. Last year, 103 women received services through Momobile at Riverside program. It is worth noting that, as we've heard earlier, 81% of all women at Riverside are pretrial. This is particularly problematic for pregnant and newly parenting women, as the incarceration of a parent is considered an adverse childhood experience. And it's quoted on the personal testimony what the ACE where that comes from. I'm deeply troubled by the notion of breaking up a family or taking a newborn baby away from its mother simply because she's not able to make bail. As we know, the criminal justice system was not built with women in mind, and it was certainly not designed to accommodate pregnant women. Pregnant women have unique nutritional needs, and we continue to work with Riverside to ensure access to appropriate foods during incarceration. Additionally, we know that many incarcerated women have experienced multiple forms of trauma, so we strongly recommend all correctional facility staff be trained in providing trauma-informed care, and I totally agree with what you're saying. Based on our expertise and following our recent forum on understanding incarceration's multi-generational impact on women, girls, and communities, held in collaboration with the Stoneleaf Foundation, we identified 3 proposed reforms that are particularly promising. First, decrease or eliminate cash bail for pregnant women and parenting mothers. 2, increase diversion programming and include home visiting services for pregnant and newly parenting women. And finally, expand the use of restorative justice practices. We are proud of our partnership with the Philadelphia Department of Prisons and will continue to provide services to incarcerated pregnanting and parenting mothers. However, we encourage the City of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to take meaningful steps to address the root causes as to why pregnant and newly parenting women end up in the criminal justice system in the first place. Whenever possible, let's keep mothers and their children together and provide comprehensive support, including evidence-based home visiting services, in order to reduce and prevent the long-lasting impact of incarceration on women, children, families, and communities. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Rachel Henderson really quickly. Rachel, if you can highlight some of the main areas of your testimony. I know we've been here for a little while, but I want to make sure that we get the gist of it. And I know most of the information is kind of common between Judge Dumas and yourself, as well as that, because we want to hear some of the solution in terms of community opportunities as well.
Okay, I just wanted to speak a little bit about.
And where you're from?
Yes. I'm Rachel Henderson, and I'm an attorney with the Defender Association of Philadelphia. I'm assigned to the Children and Youth Unit at this time. Been with the Defender Association for 17 years. I've probably represented children for 16 of those years, or 15 of those years I've been at the Defender. I spent a lot of time with the Honorable Lori Dumas in her courtroom. I was here to talk about incarceration of children. We have 3 different types of places we send our children to, basically, in the juvenile system. Residential treatment facilities. This, you basically need a prescription by a psychiatrist to go. It says your mental health needs are best met,
can best be treated in this type of facility. If anybody remembers, we had one in the city of Philadelphia, that was Wordsworth. That facility is now closed because a child died there. Philadelphia also contracts with facilities that are thousands of miles away in New Mexico and Arkansas. Imagine if you were a child being sent thousands of miles away from your home to get help. Imagine if that is your child that they have sent 1,000 miles away. We also have one secure facility for girls in the state of Pennsylvania at this time. It is Danville. Danville is currently the subject of a lawsuit by the Disability Rights Project for the abuse of children. Disability Rights went to visit the girls at that facility. They got them to sign releases for all of their information so Disability Rights could represent them in this suit. The staff at Danville then convinced those children, those girls, to rescind those releases. At that time, I personally went back up to Danville as a member of the Defender Association and had those girls re-sign those releases. As a result, that lawsuit has proceeded, and we're in the process of negotiating with YDC Danville to make the changes that we need to make for those children. In addition, we only are left with one other facility for girls in Philadelphia. It is New Outlook Academy. That is 5 hours away. When you send a child 3 or 5 hours away from home, not only are they looking at people that don't look like them and they are separated from the people that they love, these children are also stripped from their families, and then the family is affected because now, if there's any kind of benefits coming into that home, mom loses those benefits, grandma loses those benefits. Now you've created a housing problem. The child no longer has a place to return to. If many of our parents and families are working hourly wage jobs, they don't have predictable schedules. They cannot take a 3 to 5 hour trip to visit children. Then everybody in the system is judging them as bad parents, and now this child cannot return to the home of their parents because mom couldn't make it because she also has 5 young kids she has to take care of. You can't put 5 toddlers on a bus that's 3 hours to 5 hours away. Has anybody tried that? I mean, that is a difficult thing to do. Look, when you send a child to secure placement, they are transported in shackles. Our girls are transported in shackles. When they arrive to a place that has barbed wire around it and they are told this is the place that's going to help you, they walk you into a room and they strip search you. Our girls have been raped. They do not deserve to be strip searched by strangers. Staff members are allowed to use restraints. If you view any of the videos of how they restrain our children, I have one girl, she was 85 pounds, a 225-pound male, took her to the ground because she did not want to talk to him anymore about her own sexual abuse. The next day, that same staff member and another 200-pound male restrained her again. We were lucky that she was being supervised by a judge that immediately pulled her out of that facility, but not every judge will do that in family court. If you saw those videos, if it occurred outside of a facility, those men would have been arrested for assault. If you attacked your own child like that in your home, you would lose custody of your child, and you would likely be arrested and spend time on state road. We took a look at some of the girls that were in placement in April of 2019. At that time, we had 17 girls in placement that are represented by the Defender Association. All of the girls were girls of color. They were placed on technical violations of probation, 69% of them. 69% of them only had misdemeanor charges. Of the 17 Defender clients, 60% had been restrained in placement. Most girls in these facilities are going for technical violations of their probation. They are going because they did not attend school or because they violated GPS. They're placed on GPS, you're supposed to have a curfew, you're supposed to be in a home. The last girl I went to see, she had left her foster home. I asked why she left. She said, because the boy in the home, I was afraid of him, that he was going to sexually assault me. I said, well, did you report this to anybody? She said, no, I didn't want to go through that again. She had previously been sexually assaulted in placement. She had to tell her story endlessly. She was moved from placement to placement. She was essentially punished for being a victim, so she chose just to leave the home at that time. Another young lady violated her GPS due to the fact that she couldn't stay in the home anymore because her mother had approximately 15 other people living in the home, and one of them was her uncle who smoked wet.
She said, I can't stand the smell. I cannot stand to be in that home all day. You don't understand how chaotic it is. I asked her about KUA, who's a community umbrella agency that's supposed to service her home. I said, was KUA aware of these people? Her response was, Miss Rachel, all the workers that come to my home only talk to me on my porch. These agencies are supposed to be there to protect our children, and they're not even entering the home. I have another young lady who was not attending school. It turns out the school couldn't accommodate the needs of her educational plan. She said to me, why should I go? All they do is suspend me, and I'm not learning anything. I think you can kind of get a picture of who our girls are in placement. They've been severely traumatized, to be shackled and driven thousands of miles away from your home, only to be restrained by men. It makes our girls worse. It does not improve their status in our community. What have we done at the Defender Association? At this point, we have implemented Project Success. This is a grant we got for $150,000 to address the school-to-prison pipeline in Philadelphia. Through an innovation, through this, one of the goals of Project Success is to address the school push-out and adultification of Black and brown girls, looking at the different needs of our girls in the system, including girl-centered, trauma-informed care, so we can appropriately address their needs and keep them from penetrating the system. We have an education attorney who attends review and disposition hearings in family court to explain to the court what is going on in our school system and how every day the school system is violating federal and state law when it comes to our kids. She has been successful in keeping our kids, helping to keep our kids out of placement due to the fact that she's been able to attend disciplinary hearings to prevent our children from being expelled from school and to make sure the schools are implementing their IEPs appropriately. We have also partnered with the Vera Institute. We were picked as one of their first cities to address the problem of girls' incarceration. We have partnered with Big Brothers Big Sisters to provide mentors to our girls, and we have sought and continue to seek out other community-based programmings. We also have a psychiatric fellow from Penn who works with us to create community-based plans to keep our girls out of placement. I say this has been a success at this point because at this time the Defender Association only has 3 girls in delinquent placement. However, we are struggling at JJSC. We have 23 girls as of today being held, awaiting RTF placements, evaluation, so we can figure out their needs so they can be placed in the community, and we're waiting for DHS to pick many of them up. And KUA workers, they just sit there for long periods of time because they're held. I would ask that City Council take a look at the money that is being spent on our children. The last number I got for the cost of state placement was approximately $160,000 a year. I think that money could be better spent on keeping our girls in the community and in their homes. Placements should be required to provide all restraint videos to council. DHS should interview any child that is restrained in a facility shortly after it happens. They should not wait. If there are any child lines, counsel should be appointed immediately to be told immediately about child lines, and all children should be interviewed following incarceration. Part of the problem is we have not held these facilities accountable. At this time, we've closed 2 of them due to their abuse of children, and that was the Defender Association who got those facilities closed. We are the ones that got the videos. We are the ones that took them to DHS and called these placements to task for harming our children. I think that one of the biggest things we need to do is also to stop incarcerating these pregnant girls and teen mothers. It is horrible to send a child away to York County to have a baby away from her family, and she will have limited or, if any, contact with the father of her child. That destroys families. I think we need to see our girls. We need to hear from them. I think that this committee needs to have these girls come in and talk about what has happened to them in this system so we can better craft to fulfill their needs. They need to know they have value, and at this point, they don't see themselves as having value.
I want to say thank you so much for that testimony. I'm totally biased because I know the work that the Defender Association does, but this is why I love when practitioners come to the table with some of the understanding of what's actually happening. We're not talking about policy alone, we're talking about practitioners, direct service providers. And so I thank you for your insight, for your knowledge, for your intellect, and most of all, your hard work and dedication to the youth in our system. I mean, your testimony and the judge's testimony mirror each other when we're talking about the problems And I think we know placement is not the answer for every kid, and if we can do some pre-entry prevention on real community supports, then we can get to the heart of and the root of the causes that are making our youth so angry, so much more violated in terms of the way they look at themselves and see themselves in society. And what we're doing is not giving us a good return on our investment. I hope that that was clear through her testimony. We send these kids to placement to rehabilitate, and they come back worse. And we paid for that.
We pay for, if I could just say this, I'm told kids can't come out of placement until they finish one group thinking for a change. There are no statistics available in Philadelphia that shows that program works, prevents reentry, or prevents further out-of-home placements. We're told consistently that FFT, Family Functional Therapy, is the best program around. I've yet to see a number that shows that it affects the level of delinquency in this city. I think that if you're going to do community-based programming, it should not be tied to the courts at all. I think the problem is that stigmatizes girls, and it has these kind of fly-by-night problems because funding for girls, I mean, they're going to tell me at DHS tomorrow or next week that there's not a problem with the girls because only 3 of your clients are in placement. Well, that number should be 0.
Thank you. I was just going to say that there was an initiative that Philadelphia was a part of years ago, and I know Commissioner Bethel would remember the JDAI strategy, where the whole movement was to decrease secure placement for juveniles in jurisdictions. And Philadelphia was one of those jurisdictions. I was heavily involved initially because I wanted to learn how to serve our kids and not have to send them to secure placement. I fell off because we went to meeting after meeting after meeting, and Philadelphia, for whatever reason, wasn't able to truly grasp the philosophy, because the issue for judges is that we need an alternative. We need alternatives. We need viable alternatives to help kids be accountable for their actions, but also to have their needs met. And we realized as well that placement lots of times was not the answer, but we had no choices. We had a school district that was failing. We had kids who were in dysfunctional homes and communities that were harming them. And lots of times we felt like, okay, well, at least if they're in placement, they're going to go to school. So at least we can get them in an environment where they can get an education so that when they come out, they can get a job. Well, you know, that shouldn't be the only reason why a judge signs an order sending a kid to placement. But if we don't have, once again, and I'm saying the same thing, if we don't have the viable services here in our community, what's the answer?
So that's a great segue for Jasmine's program. But let me just say one thing, that the good news of what I've heard here is that there is a common passion to get it done. The bad news that I hear here is that 2 things happen. One, peanut butter doesn't know jelly exists, and they haven't gotten together, and quantifying what good is and how much it costs, elevating those things that are successful, and kind of eliminating the things that aren't, even if they make us feel good and want to give it a hug. We have to be stronger for our children to make sure that we bring the things that are working to scale and not be pressured to just fund things just for funding's sake. So with that, bring it home.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilman Jones, and to the Criminal Justice Reform Committee for having me speak. My name is Jasmine Smith. I'm the owner and CEO of Icons Lacrosse and Field Hockey, geared towards inner city children and children of color playing field hockey and lacrosse. We are a curriculum-based holistic method where we use holistic aspects from teaching our children financial literacy, self-esteem building, academic support, healthy food options, and various others. We're a 4-tier program, so one of the things that we go into schools that normally do not have field hockey and lacrosse, we create systematic teams. We're also a club program, so on the weekends we have a club program where we have girls ages 5 through 18 participate in our program.
We facilitate tournaments and clinics through our governing bodies of USA Field Hockey and US Lacrosse and the Olympic Association. And 4, we have an international model where we continue growing the game on that aspect. In the last 6 years, we've had close to over 560 girls participate in our program, from our middle school through our high school program. Out of those 560, 77 girls have either gone off to college to participate playing lacrosse or field hockey, continue their education through college, as well through trade school. In our efforts, we have just recently partnered with University of Pennsylvania, where we are part of their umbrella, going in through those demographics to then continue creating the structure for field hockey and lacrosse through our curriculum and tactics. With that, one of the things that we just put together this past year was creating a model that really speaks to what we're addressing right here. We're working with the two departments, Department of Psychology and Department of Social Work. And through that, we're navigating with girls whose parents have been incarcerated. What we found in previous years were the different areas of rage, anger, that then allotted the girls not to fully participate in the capacity which they could. So with that, we partnered with Penn and those various departments to then create this model of change and infrastructure. What has happened is that we've seen an increase of the girls' participation being able to now open up and really allow themselves to see past their traumas. It's very an inaugural stage, but yet and still we see that it's a gateway of creating change in an infrastructure that could be placed throughout this whole city, you know, once we get the statistics after these 5 that we're working with right now. Through this, we've been able to vet, you know, the process as well to make sure that, you know, we're holding not only our graduate students that are participating in this program to then be able to then create the structure model that then will be able to then allot these girls the assistance that they need going forward, you know, after they finish working with our program. And hold the university as well as accountable because they are part of the community, which is under the Netter Center that we're working collectively with. As well, we're working to create a program for those children whose parents are incarcerated to join our program to then be able to then offset some of the things that, you know, they're going through, the traumatic, the trauma that they're witnessing alongside of the very other variables that children in those scenarios do not mention just due to the fact that they have never been allotted to communicate the different levels of frustration and various others. One of the other pieces that we were looking into were working with the juvenile system, prison system, in reference to, let me slow down, in reference to having those children, as you both all 3 mentioned, being able to then have a pipeline so that they would be able to then participate with our program as a mean and a measures to then have their records expunged after they finish working through our program and our curriculum and our rites of passage, which is something that each child has to do in order to go to the next level in our program. This is dear to me because this past August, I lost one of my former players from Strawberry Mansion High School. She was murdered in a stabbing incident, and she was a young woman that had a bright future. Upon learning about, you know, the incident, my heart not only went out to Shantae and to her family, but as well as to the young woman that, you know, that was a part of the incident. And the whole time in the duration and meeting with my administrators, I could not help but think if there had been something in place for her, that maybe that this incident would not have happened. But again, due to the statistical numbers that everyone has mentioned, you know, on this panel sitting here, it is quite disturbing because she sits in a pool of girls that feel as though that they don't have hope, that there is no structure in place. And if we collectively can figure out something to ensure that she is, that girls like her would be able to then benefit from being in programs like
icons or various others, whether it's sports, arts, music, to give them some type of structure going forward. So, thank you for your time.
Go ahead, you can clap if you want. I want you to know that as a former track coach, I understand clearly what you meant. I've had athletes that had great household experiences with supportive parents, and I've had talented athletes that did not. And the difference in that was that all of them had a structured place to come to, which equalized the playing field. So the rambunctious North Philly kid that had it hard worked with the middle-class kid and found common ground and things like that, to realize that beyond their 10 square block existence, there was a whole world. Sports does that. You failed to mention that that's a non-traditional sport, giving young ladies from inner city sticks to go out and capture balls and do all of that stuff in a targeted, aggressive way with rules attached. How does that impact?
We've seen a difference in a lot of our school programming and even in our club programming. Of course, our school programming is geared towards, a certain demographic. Our club is a mixture of different financial brackets. And so again, speaking to your point, the girls will, when they come for our club program, they're meeting various girls from different regions that's coming from different backgrounds. And then it enables them to then raise the bar of standard. For our school programming, it's important because, you have to fish to get them in. And so there constantly that community is based upon track, basketball, football, volleyball, and cheerleading. So again, it's really pitching to them, do you want to change your life? And then with that pitch, then you're really showcasing them where their life can take them. And then creating that trust factor in all of our schools that we have programming in through our coaches. And then from that moment, the girls join in. Sarah High School is one of our new programs that we had, and right now we're at 47 girls in our program. That's from 9th grade up to senior years, being a senior. And the majority of the girls did not want to play. It's not, because they didn't know anything about it. But then after showcasing, and I believe that that's the thing that children have to know, that you're there. Every day we showed up. Every day, they constantly showed up, and so it became this trust factor and this bridging of the gap. And from there, these girls just recently, this past year, we went to nationals. We had 9 of our girls from our club team. Out of the 9, 3 came from Sarah High School. These girls had only played a limited amount of 6 months for lacrosse, which is unfathomable in the lacrosse community. So it's been proven if you give them the opportunity to create the access line.
So we got to get you in front of these judges.
Yes, This is what we need to be funding. And I don't know, Judge, if you have any influence to gather people like her to come into, seriously, to come into a program lecture. And I mean, because I've known Jasmine, and I know how passionate she is, and I know how those girls love her. Not only do they love her, they trust her, and she pours her heart into this, and they see her as a reflection of themselves. And that's who we need for our girls, not these 270-pound men in Luzerne County. We need Jasmines of the world, because our Philadelphia girls need to see that.
Yeah, if I could add, and I don't know if Jasmine even remembers this experience, but the team went, the club team that my little girl was a part of, they went way out somewhere, way out in one of the counties to play a game. And it was clearly, a racial divide. I mean, that's just how it is. And I could see our girls, when we got there, and they saw the team and what the team looked like, because, they were in their fancy uniforms. Our girls were like, pick up sticks. And, stuff was donated. It was clear that there was intentionality about making sure that the other team was prepared, both physically and mentally. You could see the hope drain out of our girls' faces, right? Through their body language, they began to slump. They began to slowly disappear.
They did.
I was livid. I was livid. And I told them if they did not get themselves together, get their faces right, push their heads up, their shoulders back, but even when we were taking a picture, they were letting the other team get in the front. I'm like, no. You guys get, and the reason why that was important, because it really just enhanced the notion that we have got to expose our children, especially our girls, to environments where they realize they matter, because they get out of our little cocoon, our neighborhoods, our schools, and they walk into an environment that they only know because of what they see on TV or what they have heard, and they automatically feel inferior. They didn't know how good this team was. They didn't know if they could play or not. All they knew was they were white, they were dressed, better than they were team-wise, uniform-wise, equipment-wise, and that something psychologically said to them, they're better. That's got to stop.
So two things, Jasmine. The mirror exercise that you do,
Yeah.
and then the site of the abroad game that you're planning for.
So one of the disciplines that we have at Icons, and that was basically rendered from how I was raised from my grandparents. And so before every practice and every game, we have a long mirror, that you have in your house. And so the girls have to stand in a single file line. They have to come and approach the mirror. They have to state their full name. And they have to do an I am affirmation. That I affirmation, they cannot look at me, they can't look at another coach, they can't turn around, they have to look directly in the mirror. And that is self-enforcing them to look at themselves. The problem is that we live in a society very similar to what Lori's saying, is we have not taught our children how to love on themselves. So then when you don't love on yourselves, you are then seeking something else to love you. And the minute that stops internally, then you are seeking it again, which then someone can deflect you to go rob a store. You can go, beat someone up. It's so many different levels to it. And so that in itself has been our saving grace for our girls, because now, and especially for the ones that are new or have trouble, then there's this establishing where they comfort each other, like, hey, look, I'm going to help you. And then they lock hands and they assist the other girl who's having problems or, with regards to saying her I am affirmation. Most recently as well, we've been selected to play in the World Lacrosse Tournament, which is teams from Asia, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, India. And our team is the first team of color to be participating on an international level. All of our girls are going from ages 5 through 18. Every girl will be participating. And we're the first team out of the city of Philadelphia from a non-traditional sport to then go off to play. This is giving access and insight. One of the things that I tell all my girls and our other coaches in other schools, these sports can give you access and opportunity beyond the United States of America if you continue playing academically, scholarly soaring. And so again, this is a part of, the bridge that we're making sure that we're closing.
So where are they going?
Ireland, 2020.
Nice.
All right.
And it develops teamwork and leadership.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to go, but I want to thank you all. Rachel, thank you so much for your powerful testimony. Judge Dumas, we always love you. We wish you'd come back. And thank you for yours as well. Jasmine, I'm a product of sports, and if it weren't for sports, I wouldn't have gone to college. So I know how much that can be life-changing. Attitude adjustment, everything, resilience, and without it, I don't think I'd be who I am. So I want to thank you for bringing that to our youth and bringing something different that allows them to have different opportunities in life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Your Honor, are you okay?
I'm okay at the moment.
Okay. So what I want to say to you is what I've learned is we have different silos that we have to break down, and we have to integrate all of the resources that we have that are working and bring them to scale so that they're impactful to him. So that's going to involve the recreation department and working with the courts to talk about in this area of maybe Frankfurt what's available for this young lady. And to be able to coordinate that a little bit, because a couple of dollars spent on the front end can stop us from having to spend a lot of dollars on the back end. And it shows that it's out there. We just have to find the straw to stir the drink to make it work together. Your Honor, do you have closing remarks? Anyone?
Well, just a short thing. Because I'm a USA track and field official and a Pennsylvania interscholastic track and field official, I'm at the schools like Central Bucks County West and East and North and South, and I'm out there. Our meetings start like at 7 o'clock until 9, and the school is open. It's full of students and parents doing sports and having meetings and everything until like 10 o'clock at night every single day. So the school, and these are public schools, not private, and so the school is so important, such an important fabric in the community as to keeping the community together and being a meeting place. And here, it's just not, it just doesn't happen anymore.
Your Honor, you're so right. I got so frustrated. I had a track club, of which you know, call me and say, can you help us raise the fees to use the track at one of our public schools in order for the kids to practice? That does not make sense to me. And we have to look at these silos and break them down. And we can't be so strapped for cash that we are penny wise and pound foolish. We have to figure it out. So thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you.
This will conclude. Is there more?
No, I just have to read something. There's no other witnesses, but there is written testimony to be submitted into the record for Sheila Ireland, Caitlin Owens, and Wilfredo Rojas, member of the committee.
So we will stand at recess to the call of the chair. Thank you all for your participation.